Chapter 8:17. Oh. Bringing over 100 elves in shabby clothes to the city lord's castle in the middle of the night. Could it have something to do with that incident in the Wind Forest 2 days ago? But Mr. Mac only returned to Chaos City today, so how could he have anything to do with them? A hint of confusion appeared on Michael's face as he listened to the guard leader's report. He turned to Novin and asked, "What do you think, Novin?" Mr. Meg is a kind and courageous person, so it's not strange that something like this happened to him. Novin nodded. Michael faltered slightly upon hearing that before a smile appeared on his face as he said to the guard leader, "Get Mr. Mac to go to the side hall. It's cold outside, so get those elves to sit in the west hall for a while. Prepare some tea for them." "Yes." The guard leader quickly strode away. Michael turned to Novin with an apologetic expression and said, "Thank you for your hard work. The school is so busy, so I shouldn't have asked you to go. You can't leave in these troubled times, and Roland can't be relied on either. Who else can go if I don't go?" Novin shook his head with a resigned expression. He paused momentarily before turning to Michael as he said, "The feasibility of the railway and the steam locomotive hasn't been verified yet. Are you sure you want to deploy so many people to do this?" Michael smiled and said, "Back then, we came to a consensus that if we want to achieve true peace on the Norland continent, then we have to get rid of the concept of borders and allow all races to live in harmony. After 100 years of hard work, Chaos City has basically achieved this. However, if we want to spread this concept across the entire continent, the most effective way is to reduce the cost of movement and increase the convenience of travel. Allow all races to enter each other's territories, and perhaps this will be an important step in the integration of the continent." Novin furrowed his brows in contemplation. "Think about it. If humans, elves, demons, and dragons, all squeezed into a small carriage and peacefully experienced a journey together, when such a situation occurs on the road, wouldn't it be an ice-breaking journey for all races? Also, does this remind you of anything?" Michael continued as he looked at Novin. Novin's eyes lit up, and he blurted out, "Amy's. Mr. Mac's intelligence always amazes me. Perhaps he understands the true meaning of equality better than we do," Michael said with a smile, and his tone was a little emotional. "It is indeed Chaos City's fortune that he is willing to stay." Novin nodded. "Furthermore, it's time for us to relax our mindset. Chaos City can't continue to be a symbol of peace. Only with enough power can we have the right to speak," Michael said with a grave expression. "You mean that?" Novin looked at Michael in surprise. "Let's start with that." Michael nodded. Meg nodded with satisfaction upon seeing that all of the elves had been arranged, and followed a guard toward the side hall. Meg had only sat down for a short while when Michael's voice sounded from outside, and he said, "Mr. Mac, congratulations on winning the Best Dish Award." "I'm not surprised at all." Meg looked up to see the burly Michael striding into the hall. He also stood up with a smile, and said, "Thank you for the compliment, City Lord. Have a seat." Michael sat down on the chair beside Meg, and asked, "Mr. Mac, why are you looking for me at such a late hour?" Meg was very fond of Michael's straightforward way of talking, so he told him about how the elves had been hunted down by demons and orcs, and how they had been tortured in an underground cellar, sold as slaves, and even raped. Michael's expression was a little dark, and his fists were clenched tightly as if he were trying to repress his rage. "These elves claimed to have been saved by the elven princess, and came to me because of a customer's recommendation. Almost the exact same thing happened in front of my restaurant. Anna, a 5-year-old elven girl, lost her grandfather as a result, and before that, she had already lost her parents." Meg looked at Michael, and said in a solemn and sincere voice, "I don't have the power to stop all of this from happening, and I don't have the power to punish the people behind all of this, but I hope that Chaos City can accept and protect them and allow them to become residents of Chaos City." I've also been keeping an eye on this situation for some time. Chaos City has sheltered some pitiful elves in the past, but when it comes to negotiations with the Wind Forest, Chaos City can only maintain a more restrained stance. Michael nodded, and his voice gradually deepened as he said, however, I didn't think that there would be such a dark chain of interests behind all of this. Even though this is a conflict between the elven race, the involvement of orcs and demons is clearly a crime. What happened in Chaos City last month made us very wary, and we've already set up a few strongholds outside of Chaos City. They're targeting the elven residents of Chaos City, and they'll be severely punished by the laws of Chaos City. Meg nodded in response. Michael didn't pretend that he had only just learned about this. As a neutral city, at the very least, Chaos City was trying its best to protect its residents, and it didn't disappoint him. The same thing keeps happening right under our noses. I feel very guilty for the decision I made 10 years ago. A hint of guilt appeared on Michael's face, and he clenched his fists as he said, after passing a citizen's evaluation, these elves will become residents of Chaos City, and they'll receive protection from Chaos City. Children of suitable age will be allowed to attend school, and elves who have already passed school age will be given jobs so that they can settle down in Chaos City. Chaos City will make an announcement tomorrow, and all elves who need protection can come to Chaos City, and Chaos City will protect them. This is the Chaos City that I love. Thank you. Meg stood up and extended a deep bow toward Michael. I also thank Mr. Mack on behalf of Chaos City. Michael also stood up and extended a deep bow toward Meg. The two of them stood up and smiled at each other. Men sure are strange. Vivian leaned against the window and looked at the two people in the room. Her gaze then fell on Meg, and she murmured, but he really does seem to be a good person. Even though he already has a daughter, if Luna really likes him, let's go visit them. I hope they'll be able to get used to living in Chaos City in the coming days. Michael led the way out of the room. Meg followed along. As they walked down the corridor, he turned to look at the window in the side hall, and a figure flashed around the corner. Chapter 8:18. Meg nodded with a smile. Looking at the smile on Michael's face, he felt as if he could see himself after Amy had grown up. Regardless of whether she had grown up or not, she would always be a child in his heart. Michael received all of the elves, and announced that they were welcome to Chaos City, and that the City Lord's castle would help them live in Chaos City. All of the elves were overjoyed, and all of them bowed to Michael and Meg in gratitude. Meg looked at the tears on the children's faces with a heavy heart. All he could do was arrange for these children to live here. Who knew how many more elves were suffering from the pain of being separated from their loved ones? However, with Michael's promise, there would most likely be more and more elves coming to Chaos City to seek refuge, and that would reduce the number of such tragedies. Meg followed the workers of the City Lord's castle to escort all of the elves to their accommodations. When he came out of the City Lord's castle, it was already midnight, and Michael had someone drive him back to the restaurant. After getting off the horse-drawn carriage, Meg thanked the coachman before making his way into the restaurant. There was still a small lamp in the restaurant for him. He took down the sign on the door, and opened it quietly. There was no one on the first floor. After locking the door, Meg tiptoed upstairs, and pushed open the door. Amy and Anna were sleeping on their small beds, while Sally was lying on the large bed, fast asleep. Meg looked at the relaxed and comfortable smile on Sally's face, and shook his head with a smile. It appeared that this trip had indeed exhausted her a lot of energy. Otherwise, she wouldn't have fallen asleep on his bed. Meg's gaze trailed down her slender legs, and his gaze settled on the pair of black leather shoes on Sally's feet. It appeared that she had only wanted to take a short nap, but Meg couldn't bear to wake her up at the sight of her sleeping soundly. He stood by the bed and hesitated for a long while before reaching out a hand toward her slender legs. 10 minutes later, Meg heaved a long sigh as he stood up from the side of the bed. His legs were a little wobbly. It turned out that it was not an easy task to take off the woman's shoes without alarming her. Meg looked at the shoes that were still warm and shook his head helplessly. This was the first time he had done something like this. Even though Sally didn't wake up, she seemed to have sensed that her legs were no longer bound. She rolled over comfortably before withdrawing her legs from outside the bed. She curled up her body slightly, and her tight cheongsam and long legs appeared rather seductive under the dim light of the warm lamp. "Don't catch a cold." Meg remained unmoved and pulled the quilt over her. Then, he walked to the small bed and tucked the two little guys in. He stood by the bed and watched them for a while. Then, with a smile, he took pajamas and a chef's suit from the wardrobe and went out quietly. After washing up, Meg went downstairs. After bargaining with the system, he bought a set of quilts and nestled in the recliner behind the counter, ready to make do for the night. "It's been a while since I made a new dish. It's time to learn how to make stinky tofu." Meg looked at the shiny golden button in the corner of his mind and hesitated for a while. In the end, he didn't click on it. Instead, he asked in his mind, "System, can I buy a gas mask in the trial space? I can't even stand the smell of stinky tofu from afar, let alone make it in close proximity. Also, I might have to repeat it countless times. That would really stink me to death." The trial space is not a physical entity, so you can't bring a gas mask in. Also, as a chef, accurately grasping the taste of ingredients in food is the most basic ability. If you can't even do this, you can't be a qualified god of cookery. Also, the stench of stinky tofu is an important indicator of whether a stinky tofu is good or not. The host needs to have a deep understanding of the different stinky tofu smells in order to make a perfect stinky tofu. These are the words you wrote on Weibo when you passed by a stinky tofu stall. The system's voice sounded with a hint of schadenfreude. Meg opened his mouth. For a moment, he didn't know what to say. These words were his original words. He must have written them when he passed by a stinky tofu stall. Why did the system take it seriously? Then I won't learn. Meg rolled his eyes and said in a somewhat hoodlum manner. If the host chooses not to learn how to make stinky tofu and fails to successfully make stinky tofu, the system will conclude that the host's path to becoming the god of cookery will be terminated due to personal reasons. The system's voice became somewhat stiff. What happens if it's terminated? After it's terminated, the host will be erased from this world. At the same time, because the host died in the original world, the host will completely disappear. Fuck. Meg raised his eyebrows and directly opened the shiny golden experience bag. Countless information flowed into his mind, causing him to be absent-minded for a moment. Then, a master-level stinky tofu creation experience appeared in his mind. So stinky tofu isn't stewed with feces, Meg muttered to himself with a surprised expression. Then, he continued to digest the experience. Just by looking at the process, I can already smell that terrifying stench. Meg stood up with a dejected expression. He went to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of ice water to calm himself down. After that, he returned to the lounge chair and wrapped himself in a small blanket. He closed his eyes and pushed open the door to the test field for the god of cookery. Compared to tofu pudding, making stinky tofu required an extremely complicated process. Just the brine alone required several steps. Furthermore, even after the system's optimization, it still required 3 days of waiting before it could be considered a success. To Meg, making stinky tofu was the easiest task. With the experience of making tofu pudding, he only had to make some slight changes to a few steps. After practicing a few more times, there would be no problems. The time acceleration of the test field for the god of cookery was activated, and Meg quickly finished making the brine according to the recipe. He leaned back and opened the lid with a reluctant expression. Meg already had some expectations in his heart. However, when that terrifying stench rushed toward him, he realized that he had greatly underestimated this stench. He jumped back 2 meters and crashed into the wall behind him. The lid flew out of his hand and embedded itself into the wall with a loud clang. This was an indescribable stench. Even an exploding toilet would have to concede defeat in front of this stench. It was as if all the stench in the world had been fused together and then exploded in an instant. Holy fuck. System, hurry up and let me out. I don't want to be the god of cookery anymore. Meg covered his nose as he slammed the wall. His face had turned green. Once you enter the test field for the god of cookery, you can't quit unless you successfully learn the dish or the 365 days are up, the system's calm voice sounded. Fuck. Meg's face gradually turned red due to the lack of oxygen. In the end, he couldn't help but take a deep breath. His face paled, and he fainted. Chapter 8:19. Host. What are you doing? In the test field for the god of cookery, even if you drink brine, you won't succeed in committing suicide. The system said in a flustered manner. Meg's gaze was cold. When he was angry, even the system was afraid of him. However, this brine that was so smelly that it could make one faint actually tasted gentle after entering his mouth. The stench gradually disappeared, and when he smelled it carefully, there was actually a trace of fragrance. As the brine spread on the tip of his tongue, the fragrance became more and more intense. It was not the fragrance of spices, but a more unique fragrance. It was the fragrance of various ingredients that had been fermented for a long time, and it was exceptionally mellow. Gulp. Meg's throat rolled, and he swallowed a mouthful of brine. The fragrance lingered in his mouth for a long time, and it only dissipated after a long time. It's actually this taste. Meg slowly opened his eyes, and his eyes were filled with surprise. Stinky tofu was definitely a taboo food for him, and it had never appeared on his menu before. He was also unable to understand why there was someone in this world who could eat something so smelly that it made one want to run away. However, this mouthful of brine had greatly changed Meg's view of the dish. What kind of taste would be produced and the rich and mellow brine collided with the tofu? It was a delicacy that was worth looking forward to. The fragrance in his mouth gradually dissipated, and the stench in the air assaulted him once again. This time, although Meg did not exaggeratedly jump a few meters away, he still took a step back. Looking at the brine in the pot, he resisted the urge to take another mouthful to prolong his life. He closed his eyes, and his heart slowly calmed down. Then, he tried to sense the smell in the air, and gradually separated a part of the fragrance. After that, he focused on sensing the fragrance in the air. When he opened his eyes again, Meg felt that the stench in the air was no longer as pungent as before. Although it was still not a pleasant smell, at least it allowed him to continue making the stinky tofu. The complicated process meant that he needed to spend more time to complete every step, and he also needed to connect every step perfectly. This also meant that the possibility of Meg making a mistake had increased. However, no. Still lacking a little. The system replied coldly. Meg was immersed in the stench, and he was madly making the stinky tofu. He had already forgotten what a stench was. His nose only followed the various smells, and he was trying to find the most harmonious combination. Beep beep, beep beep, at 5:00 in the morning, Sally was woken up by a strange noise. The warm and comfortable quilt made her unwilling to open her eyes. She had never felt that the quilt could be so soft and comfortable. The bed and pillow were also exceptionally soft, as if she was sinking into a ball of cotton. Wait, this is... Sally immediately opened her eyes. Looking at the strange yet familiar surroundings, her eyes gradually widened. As if thinking of something, Sally abruptly turned her head to look beside her. There was no one else on the spacious bed, which made her sigh in relief. Sally lifted the quilt and took a look. Her clothes and stockings were still on her. Although the cheongsam was a little messy, it should be normal after sleeping with clothes on. Only then did Sally completely relax. Thinking back, after she had accompanied Anna to bed last night, she had only wanted to close her eyes and rest for a while, but she was simply too tired, and ended up sleeping all the way until the sun came up. Thinking that this was Meg's bed, Sally's face immediately reddened. She didn't expect to fall asleep on a man's bed and sleep until dawn. But, when I was lying on the bed last night, I seemed to be wearing shoes. Then why? Sally looked at the side of the bed, and saw a pair of black leather shoes neatly placed on the side of the bed. Could it be? Sally suddenly remembered that ants seemed to have crawled over her feet in her sleep last night. Thinking back, she still had some recollection of that numbing feeling, and her face, which was already a little red, became even redder. Although she didn't think that Meg was a despicable person who would take advantage of her, and perhaps he just wanted to let her have a good night's sleep, the thought of a man taking off her shoes for her and even touching her feet made her feel both embarrassed and angry. She wanted to find a hole to hide in. "Ha! Big sister Aisha, why are you here? Where's father?" Amy was woken up by the alarm clock. She sat up and looked at Sally in confusion. Didn't big sister Aisha go back last night? Did she sleep with Uncle Meg? Anna poked her head out from behind Amy with a curious expression. Ugly Duckling was trying its best not to fall off the bed, and also looked at Sally with wide eyes. Sally turned around to look at the three curious little ones, and a panicked expression appeared on her face. She waved her hands, and said, "It's not what you think." Wow! This is the first time something like this has happened. Amy jumped down from the small bed with excitement on her face. She then lifted a corner of the blanket, and asked curiously, "Then where would father be hiding?" "There's nothing under the blanket." "Then what about under the bed?" "There's nothing under the bed either." Anna put down the blanket in her hands, and looked up with a shake of her head. Ugly Duckling ran to the wardrobe with excitement on its face, and pulled on the wardrobe door. Amy and Anna ran to the wardrobe at the same time, and then pulled open the wardrobe door on both sides. There was nothing in the wardrobe aside from neatly folded clothes. "There's nothing here." Disappointment appeared on both Amy and Anna's faces. Phew, Sally heaved a sigh of relief. However, she then felt like crying. Why did she feel like she had dodged a bullet? Obviously, nothing had happened. She had only accidentally fallen asleep on Meg's bed. "Don't worry, big sister Aisha. Even though we didn't find father, we won't believe that nothing happened between the two of you," Amy consoled Sally. "Yes, I once heard a storyteller say that when a man and a woman lie on the same bed, something will happen. However, whenever the storyteller reaches this part of the story, Grandpa will always cover my ears, but I'm sure it's something very important." Anna nodded in agreement. Sally looked at Amy and Anna with her mouth slightly agape. She suddenly felt like she wouldn't be able to explain herself even if she had 10 mouths. Chapter 820. Ha! Meg, who had just come out of the test field for the god of cookery, didn't even have a chance to take a deep breath of fresh air before he was startled by Amy's sudden question. He looked at the curious Amy and Anna, who were poking their little heads out of the staircase, and suddenly realized what had happened. The two of them must have woken up this morning and discovered Sally lying on the bed, so they came up with this bad idea. Thinking of the terrible consequences that this misunderstanding could lead to in the future, Meg hurriedly shook his head with a smile, and said, "How could that be? Father went out last night, so big sister Aisha slept with you two in the room. Father slept alone on this recliner last night, so he didn't sleep with Aisha. I see. Amy looked at the blanket on the recliner with a slightly disappointed expression. Yeah, big sister Aisha slept with us last night. She must have been too tired, so she also fell asleep. Anna nodded with a pained expression. All right, I believe you. Amy nodded before turning to Meg with a curious expression, and asked, So, Father, what are we having for breakfast? Anna also looked at Meg with an expectant expression. You can order whatever you want on the menu. I'll make whatever you want. Meg heaved a sigh of relief. Thankfully, Amy was a foodie and wouldn't dig into this matter. He only hoped that she would forget about this matter the next time he saw Irina. Upstairs, Sally tidied up her clothes as she walked out of the room. Her face was still red, and her head was a little dizzy. She had never experienced this kind of situation before, and she didn't know what kind of strange things the two of them would say. She had to stop them. Click, just as Sally walked out of the room, the door of the opposite room also slowly opened. Barbara walked out of the room, rubbing her sleepy eyes. As soon as she opened her eyes, she happened to meet Sally's eyes, and both of them stopped in their tracks. Barbara looked at Sally, whose hair and clothes were a bit messy and whose face was still red. Her eyes gradually widened as if she had discovered something incredible. Sally became even more anxious at the sight of Barbara's widening eyes. She really didn't know how to explain herself. The two of them stood facing each other, and the atmosphere was somewhat awkward and silent. Sister Aisha, did you sleep with the boss? Barbara broke the silence after a while. Sally broke down. The farce about whether Sally and Meg slept together came to an end after Meg tried his best to clarify. However, during breakfast, the atmosphere at the table was still a little strange. Sally was sitting opposite to Meg, eating her fried rice with her head lowered. Although she had regained her composure, she still avoided looking at Meg. On the other hand, Amy and Anna were completely immersed in the delicious food and enjoyed their meal. However, Barbara wasn't as calm as she was. She looked at Meg and Sally with a scrutinizing expression, trying to find some clues from their expressions. Compared to the usual relaxed and cheerful atmosphere, the dining atmosphere was a little more depressing. Yabamiya, who was eating a rujiamo off to the side, also noticed the strange atmosphere. Her golden dragon tail swayed gently behind her, and she asked in confusion, "What happened? Why aren't you saying anything?" "Last night, Sister Aisha." Amy swallowed the tofu pudding in her mouth, and was just about to say something. Aisha just came back last night. Although she rested for the night, she should still be a little tired. Today is the first day of the restaurant's reopening, so it might be a little busy. Be prepared, Meg finished Amy's sentence for her. He didn't know what she was trying to say, but children's words carried no harm, so he had to nip this rumor in the bud. Otherwise, there was a very high chance that it would spread. Yes, Sister Aisha just came back last night, and Anna said that they brought back a lot of elves. Sister Aisha is a hero. Amy looked at Sally with admiration and reverence in her eyes. It's great that Aisha is back, we've been so worried about you too. Yabamiya looked at Sally with a smile. She had been on tenterhooks for the past few days. Yes, it's great that you're back. Meg also nodded with a smile. Sally could sense the concern in Yabamiya's eyes, as well as the gentle look in Meg's eyes, and the displeasure in her heart gradually dissipated. Meg clearly wasn't the type to take advantage of others when they were down. He had only removed her shoes for her so that she could sleep more comfortably. A smile appeared on her face, and she nodded as she said, "I'm fine." The awkward atmosphere was thawed by Sally's smile. Sally took a glance at Meg, and a hint of indescribable emotions welled up in her heart. A signboard had already been hung up at the entrance of the restaurant, and there were over 100 people in 2 long lines at the entrance. Mr. Mac is finally back. Otherwise, I would have gone to Rodu to look for him. I was worried that Mr. Mac had caught the eye of King Roth and was forced to stay in the royal palace as a chef. Thank God he's back. Looks like Mr. Mac must have gone easy on him during the banquet. Otherwise, with his cooking skills, there's no way the king would have allowed him to come back. If I were him, I would have chained him up in the royal palace. All of the customers were discussing fervently with excitement on their faces. It was a rare sight for the sweet and savory factions to be in harmony. Who said Mr. Mac went easy on him? I just received a letter from Rhoda yesterday. My brother-in-law told me that Mr. Mac won the Best Dish award during the banquet, but he turned down the king's offer of a high-ranking official and a high salary. He also turned down the opportunity to rise to the top in the Roth Empire. A young man in a lavish robe in the line yelled. Everyone turned to look at him, and the smile on his face widened as he mysteriously said, "Do you know what reason Mr. Mac used to turn down the king's offer?" What reason? All of the customers asked curiously. Their emotions had already been stirred up. Mr. Mac told King Roth that there are a bunch of regular customers in Chaos City waiting for him to cook for them. He turned down the king's offer of a high-ranking official and a high salary, and returned to Rodu without hesitation. That young man's voice rose a few octaves, and he was clearly a little agitated. There was a brief moment of silence at the entrance of Mamis. The surprise on everyone's faces gradually turned into excitement, and then erupted into an uproar. Mr. Mac actually gave up such a great opportunity for us. I'm so touched. Regular customers. What an affectionate title. I feel like I'll never be able to leave Mamis. Chapter 8:21. Emotional resonance was a very peculiar feeling. Just a short sentence made all of the customers feel like their days of waiting were worth it. The feeling of being valued more than the king made everyone feel a sense of bliss. Given the same choice, no one dared to say that they could do what Meg had done. Soon, some of the people who had received news from Rodu began to narrate the events that had transpired during the palace banquet. The competition was supposed to be a simple one, but Mag had triumphed over countless chefs' corpses to secure the best dish of the palace banquet. There was also a version where Meg seduced the king with his body, forcing the female servants to serve his dish to the king. The king was very fond of the dish after tasting it, and as such, received the Best Dish award. Mr. Mac really wanted to punch someone in the face after hearing this version. The royal banquet in Rodu had become the hottest topic of the morning for all of the customers, and they knew that most of these versions weren't very reliable. However, Meg was the only chef from Chaos City who had traveled to Rodu to win the Best Dish award, and that was already a legend in itself. After all, there was no other occasion on the entire continent where so many renowned chefs had gathered. After breakfast, Meg pushed his bicycle out with the breakfast he had brought for Crassus in the basket. He greeted all of the customers with a smile on his face. He wasn't used to such a harmonious atmosphere in the morning. Amy climbed onto the back seat of the bicycle and asked, "Do you guys think tofu pudding should be salty or sweet for breakfast?" Of course it should be sweet. Salty tofu pudding is heretical. Bullshit. Salty tofu pudding is the best of all tofu puddings. Meg shook his head with a resigned expression. He glared at the petals, and carried the giggling Amy to class. When he returned to the restaurant, the sweet and savory factions were still arguing over whether the tofu pudding should be eaten sweet or savory. There were quite a few detailed arguments being made, and Mag felt as if their debating skills had improved significantly. In fact, they were even better than the mathematicians in Rodu. The restaurant opened for business, and the customers filed in and began to order. Perhaps it was because they hadn't eaten delicious food for a few days, so many people ordered 1 or 2 more dishes than usual, increasing the amount of food they ordered. After all, this was the first meal after his return, and Meg didn't want to see customers lining up for breakfast. Hence, he went all out, and breakfast was brought out from the kitchen and served to the customers' tables. His efficiency was very high. The customers also spontaneously took care of the customers behind them. After the meal, they immediately paid the bill and left, not occupying the table for a long time. After the morning opening hours, Meg rotated his sore wrist and let out a long sigh of relief. Even with his current physical fitness, preparing breakfast for 300 people in an hour and a half was not an easy task. However, looking at the happy smiles on the faces of the guests, he felt very satisfied. Meg took off his apron and walked out of the kitchen with a glass of water. Sally and Yabamiya were cleaning the dining room. Ling ling. A knock sounded on the door, and Meg made his way over to open the door with a glass of water. Gloria was standing outside the door, wearing a long blue dress. Her slightly wavy blonde hair was still draped over her back. She smiled at Meg and said, "Mr. Meg, may I have some of your time?" "Of course, the restaurant is being cleaned right now." "Please take a seat, Miss Gloria." Meg was slightly surprised to see that it was Gloria, but he still smiled as he led Gloria to an outdoor table. Gloria sat down, and looked at Meg with reverence in her eyes. "I heard that Mr. Meg won the Best Dish Award at the Royal Banquet. Congratulations." "Thank you." Meg nodded with a smile, and asked, "Are the dresses and other accessories ready?" Meg had heard about the competition between Gloria and Cyril from her. Meg wasn't very fond of the second son of family Moreton after the incident at Ricky's rotisserie, so he was naturally more willing to let Gloria win the competition. The Moreton family was a colossus. At the very least, that was the case for the current Mag. In order to deal with such a colossus, he had to deal with it from the inside. As for the purpose of Gloria's visit, it didn't take long for him to figure it out. This young mistress wouldn't come to him so early in the morning to talk about her life goals. Gloria nodded with a hint of pride on her face as she replied, "That's right." Due to the increase in the number of tailors and the increase in proficiency, all of the sets have been completed. The dresses will be delivered to the customers one by one after 3 inspections, and the other 2 dresses will also be officially released tomorrow. Very good. As long as quality is guaranteed, increasing production efficiency is one of the ways to increase profits. Meg nodded with approval as he said, "If the suede textiles shop is too small, perhaps we can find a place to set up a production factory. If the customers are greeted by a busy tailoring scene after entering the shop, it'll detract from their shopping experience, and they'll lose some room for imagination." Gloria pondered this for a moment before an enlightened look appeared on her face. She nodded, and said, "I understand. I'll get all of the tailors and tools out of the shop today and arrange a more suitable space for them to work in. It's already late autumn in the blink of an eye, so these dresses won't be worn for much longer. I drew 2 designs during my spare time in Rodu a few days ago. I'll go get them for you, young Mistress Gloria." Constantly releasing new products is an important prerequisite for a women's clothing shop to remain the #1 priority in women's hearts, Meg said as he rose to his feet and made his way into the restaurant. "Did you draw 2 designs in your spare time?" Gloria's mouth gaped open slightly as she looked at Meg's departing figure with an expression of reverence in her eyes. Beautiful dresses, fresh and adorable dresses, the designs for the 3 dresses had already stunned her to the core. Even the most experienced tailor wouldn't be able to create such beautiful dresses, yet Meg was telling her that he had designed 2 more dresses during his spare time in Rodu. That was simply astonishing. Gloria didn't even need to look at the designs to know that Meg was going to come up with designs that would amaze her. Even she was a little surprised by her own confidence. Meg made his way out of the restaurant with 2 pieces of paper and a glass of water in his hands. He placed the glass of water aside before handing the 2 pieces of paper to Gloria with a smile as he said, "These are some random doodles, I wonder if you'll like them." Host, those were designed by the system. Chapter 8:22. The system's protest was ignored by Meg. After all, he had spent money on it, so he had no qualms about it. As for the system's human rights, he didn't deserve such a thing. Gloria took the 2 blueprints that were tied together with a thin hemp rope. She carefully untied the rope and slowly unfolded the paper. The first thing that came into view was a rather peculiar grayish-white long coat. It had a large lapel design and was knee-length. A thin belt was tied around the waist, accentuating her slender waist. The hem of the coat was draping down, accentuating her figure and temperament. Even though it was only a sketch, it still gave off a sense of elegance and serenity. It was fresh and elegant, and had the temperament of a lady. Gloria was a little dazed. "What a beautiful coat!" Gloria exclaimed after a while. Even though she had never seen a coat like this before, she was certain that this coat would be loved by women the moment she saw the drawing. She even wanted to keep this coat for herself instead of selling it to others. If such a beautiful coat belonged to her alone, how wonderful would that be? However, she also knew that if she wanted to become the successor of family Moreton, she had to do more than that. She had to win the competition with Cyril. This is a windbreaker. Because the design is more three-dimensional, it can't be made with ordinary silk fabrics. However, the tailor should know what kind of fabric to use. Meg reminded her with a smile. As an amateur tailor, he didn't dare to point out what to do. However, Meg felt a little happy when he felt Gloria's admiring gaze. After all, it was hard not to be happy when such a beautiful woman looked at him like this. "Yes, yes." Gloria nodded seriously. Then, she opened the other blueprint with anticipation. In this blueprint, there was still a windbreaker, but compared to the previous one that was fresh and elegant, this black cloak-like windbreaker looked domineering. The wide hem of the windbreaker was even more prominent, and it also made people unable to take their eyes off it. It was just that the style did not suit her. "Mr. Mag, you really are a genius. Even an experienced tailor who has been making clothes for several decades is amazed by your creativity. I'm sure these 2 trench coats will lead the fashion trends of this fall and winter, and become a topic that all of the women in Chaos City can't avoid." Gloria put away the 2 designs, and praised Mag from the bottom of her heart. "Miss Gloria, you're too kind." Meg shook his head with a smile. Even though he didn't know anything about tailoring, Meg felt like he had a good eye for fashion. He had often seen these 2 windbreakers in fashion shows in the past, but they were different styles on the models. However, both of them had their own unique qualities, and could satisfy the needs of different women. After that, Meg and Gloria chatted briefly about Luna's foundation. Gloria had promised to donate 10% of the profits from the suede textile shop to the textile shop, while Meg had also promised to donate 10% of the profits from the ice cream shop. However, Meg had been quite busy recently, so he hadn't really done anything yet. Gloria looked at Meg, and said, "I've already asked the finance department to make preparations for the donation. I plan to make a tally of the profits for the month before making the donation. After that, I'll make the donation on a quarterly basis. Due to the fact that this is a special fund for clothing, I personally prefer to use this fund to make clothes for children. I hope this money can be put to good use." Meg nodded in response. "That's very thoughtful of you. I'm also planning to do the same so that it'll be easier for me to tally the donations every quarter. Thank you for your blueprints, Mr. Meg. I have to go back and get them to find a suitable place for tailoring. I'll be taking my leave now." Gloria rose to her feet and bade farewell to Meg. A smile appeared on Meg's face as he looked at the departing horse-drawn carriage. Perhaps this young mistress would also become an outstanding businesswoman in the future. Meg took a sip of water and was just about to rise to his feet when another black horse-drawn carriage drove toward the restaurant. It stopped in front of the restaurant, and Miss Hill emerged from the carriage in a red dress. She stood on the shaft of the carriage and looked down at Meg with a smile. "Long time no see, Mr. Meg. How have you been, Miss Hill?" Meg also looked at Miss Hill with a smile. Compared to Gloria, who was a little white flower that had just entered the business world, this Miss Hill was a thorny rose that had been through many trials and tribulations. Even he felt as if he had met his match. Miss Hill alighted from the horse-drawn carriage and sat down in front of Meg with a smile. "I heard that King Andre had offered you an offer that was difficult for most people to refuse. I was very worried about you for a long time, but I'm relieved to hear that you've returned to Chaos City. It would be such a waste for a talent like you to stay in the royal palace as a chef. Even if I don't stay in the royal palace, I'm still a chef in Chaos City. It's not a waste, it's just a job." Meg shook his head. He looked into Miss Hill's eyes, and said, "But Miss Hill, you don't have as much free time as a chef like me. May I know why you're here so early in the morning? If I say that I want to eat Mr. Meg's breakfast, I wonder if Mr. Mac will make one for me?" Miss Hill asked with a smile. Meg shook his head with a smile. "The morning opening hours have passed. If Miss Hill is here for breakfast, I'm afraid you'll have to come earlier tomorrow. Then let's get down to business. I've already drafted a detailed 3-party contract for the business that Mr. Meg discussed with me before he left. At the same time, Buffett Banks has set up an independent steam division to conduct comprehensive research and promotion of steam engines and steam locomotives. The City Lord's Castle has also set up a new secret division to work with the steam division. Both parties will collaborate on the development and promotion of steam locomotives. The goal is to have a working steam locomotive by the end of the year. Now, what we need is Mr. Meg's technical support," Miss Hill said to Meg with a very serious expression. Meg was a little surprised by the efficiency of Buffett Banks and the City Lord's Castle. They had actually completed the initial planning and preparation work in such a short time. After thinking for a while, he nodded, and said, "After I've confirmed that there's no problem with the contract, I'll provide all the design drawings and follow up on the project." "All right, I look forward to working with you." Miss Hill stood up, and extended her hand to Meg. "I look forward to working with you." Meg also stood up, and reached out to shake Miss Hill's hand. Chapter 8:23. The wind forest was filled with lush greenery, and all types of birds were flying through the forest. This forest was known as the Norland's Eye, and was widely acknowledged to be the most ancient and beautiful forest on the continent. The elves, who symbolized elegance and beauty, lived here. They were in perfect harmony with nature, making the plants and trees their friends and even battle partners. Their miraculous ability made all races exclaim in admiration. As such, the Tree of Life became the holy tree of the elven race, symbolizing the harmonious relationship between the elves and nature. However, many of the towering ancient trees had been felled and turned into lumber. The tree houses and wooden cabins in the forest had disappeared, and majestic palaces had appeared in their place. The rings on the trees, which were hundreds and thousands of years old, seemed to be crying for something. However, the elves who were hurrying through the palaces didn't seem to be paying any attention to all of this. It was as if they had already forgotten how many elven warriors' corpses were buried under the forest that their ancestors had once guarded. It had been 3 days since the elven princess returned to the forest. The events that had taken place outside the wind forest that night were still brewing in the forest, and there seemed to be terrifying waves brewing beneath the calm surface. In a grand palace, several elderly elves were gathered together. If any other elves were to see this, they would definitely be surprised to see all of the major elven families' leaders gathered here. "Bastard! How many times has Irina ruined our plans? She killed Schubert, changed the laws, and even set free the slaves that were sent out of the forest. Does she still have us in her eyes? Does she think she's already a queen? A slightly obese elf roared in rage. The fat on his body trembled, and his red face appeared to be extremely furious. That's right. Those mercenary groups don't even dare to come to the Wind Forest to deliver goods. If this continues, our supply of goods will be completely cut off. I was thinking of getting a few young and beautiful girls to warm my bed during this winter, a tall and thin elf beside him said in a frustrated manner. All of the elves in the palace wore furious expressions, and they were all cursing at Irina. The elderly elves sitting near the head of the table were quite calm, and didn't participate in the cursing. However, their tightly furrowed brows indicated that they weren't as calm as they appeared to be. That's enough. The tall elf sitting at the head of the table said with some displeasure. The hall gradually quieted down, and everyone's eyes fell on him. Master Borg, what do you think we should do now? One of the elves asked in a quiet voice as he looked at the tall elf in a slightly fearful manner. Borg Kelt was the grand elder of the Seged family, as well as the #1 war god of the elven race. He had led the elven warriors to many victories during the war among species, and his prestige among the elven warriors was second only to that of the elven queen. In the hearts of his personal guards, Borg Kelt was paramount. There were rumors that his strength was close to that of the elven queen, and he was known as the #1 warrior of the elven race. There were also rumors that the queen had been severely injured during the war and had spent most of her time in seclusion. Her injuries had most likely worsened, and Borg was most likely the most powerful being in the elven race. The elven queen was hereditary, and Irina had always been regarded as the successor of the elven queen. However, Irina was very aggressive, and she was extremely displeased with the elven system, so she was constantly trying to change everything. This made all of the elves who were enjoying their current status quite uneasy, but in the face of Irina's fearsome aptitude and the elven queen's indulgence, no one dared to do anything. 3 years ago, she had given birth to Alex's child, and that scandal had given rise to some other ideas among the elves. Some elves were trying to elect a pure elven princess to inherit the throne, such as Helena and her branch of elves. They were constantly searching for suitable elves to become the successor. However, some elves began to develop other ideas as they looked at Borg. Borg was only around 600 years old, and given the elves' long lifespans of over 1,000 years, nothing would have to change if he were to become the elven king. In fact, they would be able to do whatever they wanted. The Set family was the most powerful family in the elven race, and they received the most elven slaves each year. Borg also liked to select slaves himself, and it was said that the Set family had to dispose of the corpse of an elven maiden every day. Borg cast his gaze toward all of the elves, and said in a grim voice, "Irina's actions have already threatened our system and threatened our rule. If we can't repress her, things like this will only continue to happen, and they will only become more and more frequent. When that time comes, the forests that we've fought so hard to protect and the families that we've built will be completely destroyed, and our loved ones will be plunged into endless pain again." All of the elves' auras gradually became heavier as flames of fury burned in their eyes. "We must protect our system with our lives." One of the elves gritted his teeth. "Irina is not a law-abiding princess. She gave birth to a child with a human, killed the mercenary squad that we hired, and released the traitor that we went to great lengths to capture. Her actions have already endangered the very existence of our family, and this is something that cannot be tolerated. Hence, we have to do something about it." Borg's eyes were as cold as ice, and there seemed to be a frosty aura emanating from his voice. All of the elves' auras gradually began to accelerate. They had already envisioned this scenario countless times, but Schubert's death was like a bucket of cold water that had been poured over their heads. However, now that Borg had stepped forward and decided to target Irina, the flames in their hearts were reignited once again. However, we received news from Rodu 2 days ago that Alex is still alive, and he killed 6 10th tier powerful beings, as well as Benson. Elliot, the leader of the Brewster family, said in a hesitant manner. His words were like a bucket of cold water that extinguished the flames that had just been ignited within all of the elves, and a hint of panic appeared on all of their faces. Indeed, the fact that Irina had given birth to a child with a human was something that all of the elves despised, but no one could ignore the fact that the child's father was Meg Alex. This man had been deemed dead 3 years ago, but he had reappeared 2 days ago. On top of that, he had slain several 10th tier powerful beings, including the spatial demon patriarch Benson, and announced the return of the most fearsome man on the Norland continent. Seeing as Alex was still alive and had saved Irina 2 days ago, no one knew if he would appear in the Wind Forest if they chose to target Irina now. The entire palace fell silent as all of the elves turned to Borg again. Chapter 8:24. Alex isn't all that scary. Even if he's still alive, he won't affect any of our decisions and plans. Borg looked at everyone with a relaxed expression and said, I once sparred with him, and I only used 80% of my power to tie with him due to Irina. He was severely wounded 3 years ago, but he didn't die, so he's most likely not as powerful as he was back then. He's just a paper tiger. Master Borg is the war god of our elven race, and that Alex is only a human in his 30s, there's no way he can compare with Master Borg. So Master Borg was purposely going easy on him back then, allowing him to strut around with his invincible title for so many years. That guy really is shameless. All of the elves' eyes lit up, and they began to praise Borg. However, there were also a few elves who had doubts in their eyes. Didn't Borg use his full power during that battle? But Alex was clearly the one who was more relaxed at the time. Elliot was looking at Borg with a confused expression. He was one of the bystanders who had witnessed the battle between Borg and Alex. Alex's power had left a deep impression on him, and he was even a little perplexed as to why that battle had ended in a draw. Vincent, the leader of the Billy family, also had a hint of doubt in his eyes, but his expression remained unchanged as he praised Borg along with all of the other elves. Borg raised a hand to silence everyone before turning to everyone, and said in a grim voice, Schubert and Colby were killed by Irina for no reason at all. Even though she's the princess of the elven race, the goddess of life will definitely condemn her for taking the lives of her brethren with such brutality. I've decided to propose to the panel of elders that Irina be deposed from her position as princess during the ceremony in 3 days, and that she pay the price for her actions. The entire hall fell silent for a while before an elf raised his arm and yelled, Depose Irina from her position as princess. Avenge Schubert and Colby. Depose Irina from her position as princess. We're going to vote for this at the panel of elders. All of the other elves also raised their hands and yelled with frenzied expressions in their eyes. Depose Irina from her position as princess, then depose her as princess, and they would finally be able to put an end to this period of unrest. Elliot remained silent the entire time. He looked at the elves in the palace, who were all in a frenzy, with a complicated expression on his face. These elves had absolute authority in their respective families. Their decisions meant their family's decisions. An event that could shake the entire elven race was about to happen. He couldn't tell if this was a good or bad time for the elves. If Irina was removed from her position as the princess, and Borg didn't want to become the king of the elves, then Sally would very likely become the new elven princess, which was a good thing for the Brewster family. However, Elliot didn't think that the Brewster family would rise to the top of the Wind Forest because of this. Since Borg was able to cripple Irina, who had the support of the Elven Queen, even if Sally became the Elven Princess or even the Elven Queen, she would still have to live under Borg's shadow or become a puppet. Furthermore, what made him uneasy was the news he received this morning. If that news was confirmed, the Brewster family would be facing an unprecedented crisis. Vincent, who was standing diagonally across from Elliot, glanced at the troubled Elliot, and a hint of gloominess flashed through his eyes. However, he quickly hid it and joined the frenzied elves again. Borg said in a deep voice, "Apart from Irina, I heard that it was 2 other elves who ambushed the mercenary squad that day. If they're traitors, find them and kill them. If they're in the Wind Forest, find them and show everyone the price they have to pay for helping traitors like Irina. Burn them." All of the elves chimed in. A hint of surprise flashed through Elliot's and Vincent's eyes, but they quickly hid it. There weren't many elves in attendance, and the gathering didn't last long. After receiving verbal promises from all of the elves, Borg announced the end of the gathering and left the palace. All of the elves also left through the back door, so they didn't attract any attention. Borg walked out of the palace, and walked along the corridor toward the backyard. Boris Kelt quickly followed along beside Borg, and an excited expression appeared on his face as he said, "Father, did you really only use 80% of your power to tie with Alex during that battle? Has your power already exceeded that of the Queen? Or perhaps even the entire Norland continent?" As the leader of the Kelt family, Boris had always been known to be a calm and collected person. However, he was unable to remain calm at this moment. If Irina were to be deposed, then the elven race would lose a candidate to become the next queen. If Borg was already more powerful than the queen and received the support of the majority of the major families, then he could become the first male elven king in the history of the elven race. As Borg's eldest son and the leader of the Kelt family, Boris was a 9th-tier magic caster, so there was a very good chance that he would become the next elven king. Borg didn't slow down as he said in a cold voice, "I encountered Benson many years ago, and was almost dragged into the void by his beast." Boris's footsteps faltered upon hearing this, and his expression instantly stiffened. Borg had almost been killed by Benson, and 2 days ago, Benson had been slain by Alex in Rodu. A chill and horror descended upon Boris's head at the same time, and all of the beautiful dreams that he had just envisioned were instantly shattered. Borg had lied to all of the elves, claiming that during his battle with Alex, Alex had most likely only used 80% of his power to tie with him. After a brief moment of absent-mindedness, Boris came to his senses, and hurriedly caught up to Borg with a panicked expression as he said, "Father, if we attack Princess Irina and Alex comes to find us, what should we do?" Borg suddenly stopped in his tracks, and looked into Boris's panicked eyes as he said in a grim voice, "Would you be willing to give up everything you have now and return to that cramped treehouse where you hunt and gather wild fruits every day?" Boris faltered upon hearing this. He looked at Borg's deep gaze and the majestic buildings around him, and he shook his head without any hesitation. However, he was still a little hesitant as he said, "But..." Borg cut him off with a cold smile as he said, "Irina wants to overthrow the entire system, and everything that you're currently enjoying comes from this system. If she doesn't get rid of you, you could be the next one to die, and you'll never be able to ascend to the highest throne. I may not have been able to defeat Alex 4 years ago, but now..." Borg extended his right hand, and a ball of grayish-white flames erupted from his palm, emanating a bone-chilling aura of death that struck fear into the hearts of onlookers. Chapter 825. After exiting the Set family's territory, Elliot was walking with a heavy heart. His servants had already prepared a carriage for him, but he wanted to think about some things as he walked. "Take care, family leader Elliot." Right at this moment, a voice sounded from behind him. A hint of surprise flashed through Elliot's eyes, but he still stopped in his tracks and wiped the gloomy expression off his face. He turned with a smile at the sight of Vincent, who was quickly making his way over to him. "Greetings, family leader Vincent. I didn't get a chance to greet you in the palace. I didn't think we'd meet here." Vincent made his way over to Elliot with a shake of his head, and replied, "No, I'm here to see you, family leader Elliot." "Oh. May I ask why you're looking for me, family leader Vincent?" Elliot asked with a surprised expression. Due to the marriage between Sally and Blower, the relationship between the Brewster family and the By-Billy family had also fluctuated, and they were currently in a rather awkward situation. Elliot had initially agreed to the marriage with the By-Billy family for the sake of the Brewster family's development and future. However, not long after that, Helena proposed to the Queen to increase the number of elven princesses, and Sally became one of the candidates. Furthermore, she was the most promising candidate among all of the other candidates. As a result, the Brewster family's status began to rise, and they were now comparable to the By-Billy family. If Sally really did become the elven princess or even the queen in the future, then the Brewster family's status would continue to rise, and they would become the #1 family in the elven race. In order to oppose this marriage, Sally had already run away from home, and no one knew where she was even now. Due to the fact that Sally had been promoted as a candidate for princess, the elders of the Brewster family no longer insisted that she marry Blower. Instead, they were more concerned about finding a way to get Sally back. Elliot was naturally very protective of his only daughter, and he couldn't bear to let her marry someone she didn't like. As such, he had wanted to turn down this marriage for a long time, but he didn't know how to negotiate with the By-Billy family. He had intentionally avoided Vincent today, but he didn't think that Vincent would come looking for him. He was just thinking about how he could use this opportunity to make things clear and end this marriage between Sally and Blower. Vincent glanced around and took a step forward. He looked into Elliot's eyes and lowered his voice as he asked, "One of the people who ambushed the mercenary corps outside the forest was Miss Sally, wasn't she?" "You?" Elliot was shocked, but his expression quickly returned to normal. He laughed dryly, and said, "Chief Vincent, you must be joking. My daughter has been visiting her aunt recently, and is not in the forest. Moreover, she has always been obedient and reasonable. She would never do something so rebellious. This is one of the arrows we found on the tree that day. I believe Chief Elliot should be familiar with it." Vincent took out an arrowhead from his wide sleeve and handed it to Elliot. The black iron arrowhead was engraved with the word Blee. Elliot looked at the tip of the arrow in Vincent's hand, and his expression immediately changed. He had also received an arrow with the same character engraved on it this morning. This batch of arrows was custom-made for Sally, and each one of them had the character, Sally, engraved on it. They were unique in this forest. Miss Sally is very smart. Among all of the arrows, only this one hasn't been erased. A ball of red flames appeared in Vincent's hand, and the tip of the sword was melted into a ball of red liquid. Elliot looked at the arrowhead that had been melted by Vincent with a hint of surprise in his eyes. He had thought that Vincent would use this arrowhead as a threat to force him to agree to Sally and Blower's marriage or force him to do something else. However, he didn't think that Vincent would destroy the arrowhead. He hesitated for a moment before asking, "Family leader Vincent, what are you doing?" Vincent waved his hand, and a deer carriage pulled by a dead stag stopped beside the two of them. He said with a solemn expression, "Patriarch Elliot, please get in the carriage. There are some things that we may need to talk about elsewhere." Elliot hesitated momentarily before nodding and getting into the carriage. Half an hour later, in a secluded room, Elliot looked at Vincent with a hint of incredulity on his face. "You're telling me that Sally is in Chaos City right now, and that she and Blower were the ones who ambushed the mercenary squad the day before yesterday?" "That's right. Ingve has sent word from Chaos City that Blower and Miss Sally went to Chaos City with those elves. Furthermore, those elves have already been taken in by Chaos City, and the city has announced that it will protect them." Vincent nodded with a complex expression as he said, "I only wanted Blower to go out for some training, but I didn't think that he would get into such a mess." Now, the By-Billy family and the Brewster family are in the same boat. If Borg were to find out that they had something to do with this, both of our families would most likely be wiped out. Training. I'm afraid you already knew that Sally was in Chaos City. A wry smile appeared on Elliot's face. An apologetic expression appeared on Vincent's face as he said, "Rest assured, family leader Elliot, I won't force Blower to marry Miss Sally. However, I don't know how long I'll be able to keep the news from spreading in Chaos City under wraps." Neither of them have made any contact with Chaos City, nor revealed their identities to those elves, but there's no such thing as a perfect wall in this world. Elliot calmed himself down before turning to Vincent and asking, "Do you have any ideas?" Vincent replied in a serious voice, "Borg is extremely ambitious, and he's already coveting the position of the queen. If he really does become the king of the elves, both of our races will definitely be wiped out. If he really is more powerful than Alex, then Irina will definitely be deposed during the sacrificial ceremony in 3 days. Whether the Queen and Mistress Helena can stabilize the situation will determine the fate of the elven race." I'm really fine, Your Highness, it's just a small bump. Besides, didn't you already treat it for me? I'll go cook for you. The sun is so bright today, and the tree of life is also very happy. Let's not go to the starry cave abode. Within a spacious cave, Alice's features were slightly pale, and she was carefully tugging on the hem of Irina's clothes with a hint of sobbing in her eyes. "No one can touch my people, Irina." Irina looked at the pale-faced Alice, and thought back to the scene when she had returned to the cave 2 days ago, where Alice was lying in a pool of blood. If she had come any later, she would have died from excessive blood loss. That wasn't just a small bump, it was a lethal wound. "You're mine, Beansprout, I'll kill anyone who dares to touch you." Irina pinched Alice's cheek before making her way out of the cave. Chapter 8:26. Her white robes drifted out of the cave like a gust of wind, and she arrived in front of another black cave in the blink of an eye. A figure stood at the entrance of the cave, looking up at the vines crawling all over the stone walls of the cave. Even though it was already late autumn, the leaves were still lush and vibrant, creating a pleasing sight to behold. A stooped old woman was cowering in the cave with a panicked expression. "You should know why I'm here." Irina landed on the ground outside the cave, and looked at the figure with a calm expression. "I know." Helena turned around and looked at Irina. Her black eyes were as deep as the night sky, but there seemed to be stars shimmering within them. She also looked at Irina with a calm expression and said, "But you were the one who did it, so I spared her life. You can do whatever you want with her." Irina looked into Helena's eyes, and her beautiful brows furrowed slightly. "What about you?" Heidi stumbled out of the cave, and she looked at Irina with a stern expression as she said, "Irina, I was the one who did all of this, it has nothing to do with Mistress Helena. You can do whatever you want with me, but if you dare to slander Mistress Helena, I won't let you off even if I die and become an undead spirit." Helena's expression remained unchanged, and she said in a calm voice, "If I wanted to kill you, I wouldn't have waited until today." Irina withdrew her gaze from Helena and turned to Heidi, and the surrounding temperature seemed to have dropped significantly. Thump. Heidi immediately fell to her knees and kowtowed to Helena a few times, causing blood to flow from her forehead into her eyes. She looked up at Helena, and tears intermingled with blood flowed down her face. She sobbed in a hoarse voice as she said, "Mistress, if there's a next life, I'd still be willing to be your slave for the rest of my life." As soon as her voice trailed off, a ball of red flames appeared in her hand, and she slapped it toward her own chest. Helena turned to the side and looked at a tender green leaf in her hand, seemingly completely unfazed by what was happening. However, the ball of flames was suddenly snuffed out before it reached her chest. Her shriveled hand struck her chest with a dull thump, but it wasn't enough to take her life. "I don't want to hear any stories about bad people, and I don't want to see you die in such a tragic manner. What right do you have to die before I give you my permission?" Irina withdrew her hand with a cold smile on her face as she looked at Heidi, whose face was gradually turning pale. A long whip that was covered in sharp spikes appeared in her hand. Slap! The whip whizzed through the air and landed on Heidi's back, tearing open a bloody wound on her skin and flesh. Her skin was already a bag of bones, and the bone in her back could be seen. Heidi let loose a blood-curdling howl, startling a flock of birds into flight. At the same time, many of the elves in the forest turned toward that direction with bewilderment in their eyes. That was Mistress Helena's residence. Who would dare to cause trouble there? This whip is for Bean Sprout. Remember, if you can't confirm that I'm dead, then don't touch any of my people. Otherwise, I'll make sure that you die an even more gruesome death. Irina's cold voice reverberated throughout the entire forest, striking everyone with a sense of fear. Very few people knew what had happened, but this warning was still very unforgettable, and at the same time, it also sparked a lot of speculation. Slap! Another whip fell, and blood and flesh flew through the air. This whip is for Snare. I've always wondered why he was ambushed in Rodu, but now I know why. Irina looked at Heidi's mangled body with a cold expression before lashing out with her whip again. This whip is for me, and of course, all of the subsequent ones will be for me as well. I don't think I need to tell you the reason, do I? The barbed whip was slicing through Heidi's flesh, and she was almost reduced to a skeleton amid her blood-curdling cries. The wind forest was deathly silent. All of the elves were listening to those bone-chilling cries in silence. Even though they were extremely far away, they were still struck by fear. No one knew what had happened to Mistress Helena, but no one dared to investigate either. Ever since Princess Irina had reappeared, the wind forest had become a little unstable. Even the normal elves could sense the shadows looming over the forest. That's enough. Helena raised a hand, and the green leaf in her hand flew through the air. It slid past Heidi's neck, where only a few pieces of flesh and blood remained, and completely cut her off. That's enough. Irina casually tossed her whip onto the ground. Her white dress wasn't stained by any blood, and she looked at Helena with a mocking expression as she said, "There are still so many scum in this forest who drink the blood of their brethren. How can it be enough if we don't kill them all?" Helena looked at Irina with a calm expression, and asked, "Can you kill them all by yourself?" "No, I'm not alone. Those elves who you call traitors and wanderers, as well as those elves in the forest who still have a conscience, will all be with me. When the spark is ignited, you'll discover that I've never been alone." Irina's expression was also quite calm as she looked at Helena in silence. Helena was silent for a long while before her brows furrowed slightly, and she said, "I admit that I made an unwise decision in order to allow more of my brethren to stay in the wind forest and allow our elven race to become more powerful. Although the elven race has indeed become a lot more powerful in the past 100 years, when the elves began to only care about pursuing power and benefits, protecting the forest and our brethren was no longer important to them. This was something that I didn't expect at the time. You planted a little beast in their hearts and waited for them to grow into man-eating beasts before saying that you seem to have done something wrong. Isn't that a joke?" Irina said with a hint of mockery. Helena looked into the distance, and shook her head as she said, "When the little beast grows its teeth, it may become a hunting dog. If it doesn't, it will become a wild beast. Although it's a little late, I'm still going to add a collar and chain to this wild beast so that it can become a good dog to guard the house." Irina looked at Helena coldly, and asked, "Even now, you still think that you didn't do anything wrong?" Helena replied calmly, "My life is only to protect the forest and my brethren. I only care about the results, and for that, I will do whatever it takes. All sacrifices are worth it. All goals that involve sacrificing innocent brethren are dirty no matter how noble they are. I'll protect the forest, but I'll do it in a different way." Irina took a deep look at Helena before turning to leave. They're going to attack you during the sacrificial ceremony in 3 days. I don't want to see you die. Helena looked at Irina's departing figure and said, after we die, you'll be the guardian of this forest. Irina's footsteps faltered, and she said calmly, I won't die, but not for you. Faint golden light flashed, and she disappeared on the spot. Helena stood in silence for a while before waving a hand, and the pieces of flesh and blood that were scattered around her gathered together to form a new elf. Sand and soil piled up to form a grave mound without a tombstone. In this life, I'll let you continue to accompany me. Chapter 8:27. After seeing off the hill, Meg made a trip to the largest bookstore in Chaos City, and bought a bunch of books about all races on the Norland continent. Many of them were about the church, and there were also some books that were suitable for Amy's enlightenment. Meg loved reading, especially after coming to this world. Through reading, he was able to quickly enrich his knowledge and expand his worldview. This was a world where money alone wasn't enough to guarantee a good life, so he had to live in a more active manner. Of course, he enjoyed living a fulfilling life like this. It was much more interesting than wandering around aimlessly every day in his past life. After paying the delivery fee, Meg gave the address of the restaurant, and the employees of the bookstore would deliver the books to the restaurant at a set time. Meg didn't want to have to haul a huge box of books back on his bicycle. After that, Meg made a trip to the ice cream shop. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the shop was already filled with customers, and there were still 2 or 3 customers waiting in line. Yabamiya's face was brimming with energy as she made her way through the customers, serving them delicious ice cream. All of the customers had sweet smiles on their faces as they enjoyed the delicious food, as well as the adorable smile on the owner's face. This affinity is probably innate. Meg stood outside the ice cream shop for a while with an approving smile on his face. Appointing Yabamiya to manage the ice cream shop was probably one of the best decisions he had ever made. Meg didn't enter the restaurant. Instead, he entered through Ricky's rotisserie, and went up to the second floor. The second floor had already been cleaned up by the system, and there were around 200 square meters of empty space. However, due to the lack of windows, it was a little dim. Meg looked around, and asked internally, System, how much would it cost to build a 3-room apartment? The system is a proper god of cookery system, not an architect system. Please don't make the system do something like this, the system replied in a serious voice. Didn't you do all the renovations to the restaurant? Meg pursed his lips. It's the system's responsibility to provide the perfect restaurant for the host. What you're asking the system to do is beyond its scope. System, are waiters an important part of a restaurant? Of course. Excellent waiters and waitresses can greatly enhance the dining experience of the customers. This is an extremely important component of a restaurant. The system affirmed. Since that's the case, isn't it very important to ensure the service quality of the excellent waitresses in the restaurant so that they can go home safely every day, have a good rest every night, arrive at the restaurant on time every day, and provide excellent service to the guests in high spirits, and provide them with a suitable location and comfortable accommodation? Meg said with a smile. If you think about it from this perspective, it seems to be quite necessary. The system said with some hesitation. The staff dormitory of the restaurant is an important extension of the restaurant. During the process of using the dormitory, you may welcome my presence. Just design according to this standard. Show me the final draft before you start the decoration. Meg nodded his head satisfactorily and then turned around and walked downstairs. Wait. Host, you. The system seemed to have suddenly come to its senses. Meg didn't stop walking. Instead, he said calmly, you can give me a price now. Of course, if you don't want to do it, I'll consider hiring another construction team. I heard that the construction team in the City Lord's castle has been quite idle recently. I'll talk to City Lord Michael, and a friendship price shouldn't be a problem. Host, with our relationship, other people have a friendship price, but we have a family price. The system was a little anxious. You also admit that you're my son. I don't have a stupid son like you. Meg pursed his lips in disdain. Host, the system can provide the best design. The floor-to-ceiling windows in the bedroom face the Aiden Square. Every morning, when you open the curtains, you'll be able to see the beautiful square. A full set of high-end custom-made furniture will bring the most comfortable living experience. The newest air circulation system will bring the freshest air and the most comfortable temperature to the room. Furthermore, the system will also specially design a 2-person bathtub for the host to visit the staff dormitory. There seemed to be a hint of evil in the system's voice. Meg, who was walking down the stairs, almost missed his footing. He leaned against the wall to steady himself, and raised an eyebrow. System, did you secretly go for tutoring? Why the hell did you prepare a 2-person bathtub for me? Research has shown that a larger bathtub can significantly increase one's happiness during the process of taking a bath. It can also evolve into more functions and unlock more postures, the system replied seriously. Alright, we'll do as you say. Mag massaged his glabella. This system was becoming more and more ridiculous. He continued to make his way downstairs as he said, however, I'll waive the design and construction fees, and give you a 50% discount on everything else. Do a rough estimate of how much it will cost, and let me know. Host, renovation design and construction are the culmination of the wisdom and hard work of a master designer and a master craftsman. How can you waive them so casually? What you're doing is immoral. It's a sign of disrespect for knowledge. Also, isn't a 50% discount a little too much? The products provided by this system are all the best of the best, and the prices are the best of the best. If you give me a 50% discount, I'll be losing money, the system said indignantly. Meg frowned. Didn't you say that we're family? Are you so stingy to your father? Have you ever seen a son pay a design fee for his father's house? You're being rebellious. Other fathers even buy houses for their wives. The system muttered. Meg raised an eyebrow. This system must have secretly gone for tutoring behind his back. Its skills had improved. However, he didn't show the slightest change in his expression. He said indifferently, if you don't want to do it, then forget it. I'll find someone else to do it. This system will do it. The system's indignant voice sounded. After waiving the renovation and construction fees, and giving the other fees a 50% discount, the deluxe room will cost a total of 500,251 copper coins. Then 500,250 copper coins it is. Forget about the fraction of a copper coin. Meg nodded, and went out on his bicycle in satisfaction. He rode in the direction of the restaurant. Didn't you already give a 50% discount? The system roared silently, since I've already learned it, it'd be a pity if I don't do it and let the foodies of this world see it. After returning to the restaurant, Meg went straight to the kitchen. He took out various tools from the cabinet below and muttered to himself. Chapter 828. In an office of the Ministry of Education in Rodu, a rather old-fashioned official was looking at Byron with a concerned expression as he said, Master, His Majesty has already approved the adoption of the decimal system, but he hasn't approved it as a standard for graduation for students. As such, there's a huge obstacle in the way of the implementation of the decimal system. Students might think that the hexadecimal system is being used in their exams, so they can't be bothered to spend time learning the decimal system. Byron smiled as he looked at the official and said, That's within my expectations. The decimal system has only truly caught the attention of the scholars of the Roth Empire during the past 3 months. We've already proven the superiority of the decimal system in computing, but we still lack sufficient theory and research to support it as a subject that can be studied by the students of the Roth Empire. Academic promotion is a long-term endeavor, and I'm already prepared to spend 5 or even 10 years to perfect and promote the decimal system. The official's brows were still furrowed as he said, but this victory is a very good opportunity for us. If we drag this out, the conservative faction could erase the negative impact of this debate. In that case, it would be very detrimental to the implementation of the decimal system. No, the victory of this debate is already a very good thing for us. It symbolizes the victory of the first confrontation between the reformists and the conservatives. Also, Fitch abandoned the conservatives and joined the reformists to learn the decimal system. It's also a very good guide for the young mathematicians and students. Byron shook his head with a smile, and said, "Our Ministry of Education is going to conduct some pilot programs for the decimal system in all of Rhoda's academies. Even though we can't replace the hexadecimal system for now, we can nurture the interest of the students so that more children will have an opportunity to come into contact with the decimal system." "That's a great idea." The official's eyes lit up. Byron nodded and said, "Go and draft a plan for now. See how many academies we can set up in Rhodu, how many teachers we need, and how much budget we'll need. Give it to me for confirmation, and you can begin to implement it." "Yes, master." The official quickly departed. Byron looked out at the old tree outside the window. The final leaf on the tree was struggling to resist the autumn wind, and it looked as if it were going to fall at any moment. "I hope I can live to see the day when the decimal system is fully implemented in the Roth Empire, west of Rhodu, General Barclay's mansion, the stud farm." A tall young man rode a black unicorn and ran a few laps around the field. Then, he stopped at the edge of the horse field and got off the horse. He threw the reins in his hand to a servant who was waiting at the side and took a hot towel to wipe his hands. He looked at the young man in a black short-sleeved shirt and said, "What's the matter?" "Young master, we just received news that the person who won the best dish at the palace banquet that day." The young man took a step forward and said softly, "Is the news true?" Timothy's gaze suddenly turned cold, and there was a hint of ferocity on his face. The young man hurriedly nodded and said, "Yes, there's no problem with the source of the news. After that guy became famous, many people investigated his identity. This should be a second-hand reseller, and we've already verified it with Chaos City. Also, we lost contact with Basin's team near Chaos City not long ago. Gould, I didn't expect you to come back after a few years with a new face. You even learned how to cook. I really didn't expect that." Timothy clenched his fists tightly as he gritted his teeth, and said, "Kill him and that bastard, then find Felia and bring her back to me." "Yes." The young man cupped his fist in a respectful salute before quickly departing. "You idiots! How many times do I have to repeat myself before you understand? This is how the string is connected. Otherwise, even if the spell formation is activated, it won't be able to move the wooden giant. Do you think I don't understand the principles behind spell formations? Do you think I don't know that I can only unleash one punch? If I can solve a 1-second problem, why would I still need idiots like you? Sigh, what a bunch of idiots." In the southwestern courtyard of the Imperial Palace, there was a floor full of wood and all types of crystals. The pockmarked Yuri was looking at all of the spell formation masters in the courtyard with their heads bowed in disappointment. After a long silence, an old man suggested in a feeble voice, "Your Highness, perhaps we could try to change the power source stones to ones with higher energy. You can try." Yuri nodded. Boom! 10 minutes later, Yuri heaved a forlorn sigh as he looked at the dying old man hanging from the wall of the courtyard. "Old fool, do you think I wouldn't have thought of such a simple method? The power source stones have exceeded the limits of this spell formation, and the spell formation will explode as soon as it's activated. Didn't Father say that all of you are the most exceptional spell formation masters in the Empire? Seeing all of you like this, it's very difficult for me to believe in the word exceptional in the future. Yuri looked at everyone with a disappointed expression. Blower, who had changed into his male disguise, came to the restaurant early in the morning to pick up Anna. He took her on a tour of Chaos City before going to the City Lord's castle. The horse-drawn carriage stopped on the street near the City Lord's castle, but Blower and Anna didn't disembark. Two workers from the City Lord's castle were pasting up a new announcement on the bulletin board next to the entrance of the City Lord's castle. All of the passers-by gathered around them curiously, wondering what new announcement the City Lord's castle had made. From this day forth, Chaos City will be open to all elven nomads. Those who wish to join Chaos City will be given a green light after a thorough investigation. Furthermore, all groups and individuals who pose a threat to Chaos City will be severely punished, a young man standing in the front row announced in a loud voice. They finally have a sanctuary. A smile appeared on Blower's face as he looked at the announcement on the bulletin board with excitement in his heart. Uncle Blower, does that mean we'll be very safe in Chaos City from now on? We won't have to worry about those bad guys coming to kidnap us anymore. Anna looked up at Blower. Blower nodded firmly in response. That's right. Chaos City will be a sanctuary for nomadic elves from now on. As long as they enter Chaos City, they'll be safe. That's great. A vibrant smile appeared on Anna's face. That's right, that's great. Blower also smiled. Did you hear? During the king's birthday banquet, a chef from Chaos City won the Best Chef award. Really? Could it be the head chef from Dukas restaurant? Beat didn't even receive an invitation. How could he have won the Best Chef award? I heard yesterday that the chef who won the Best Chef award was the owner of Mamis. That badass. How about we go and try it out for lunch today? Chapter 829. News that Meg had won the Best Dish award during the Roth Empire's royal banquet quickly spread throughout Chaos City as if it had sprouted wings. Of course, those who were paying close attention to this were the foodies. This was a banquet that had gathered all of the best chefs in the world. It was said that each chef could only cook one or two dishes, and even then, there was no guarantee that they would be able to serve the king. The fact that he had won the Best Dish award during such an event was a testament to the importance of this honor. The fact that such a top-notch chef was from Chaos City, and he even had a restaurant in the Aiden Square was a testament to his allure. Rodu had always been referred to as the capital of food, and was the holy land in the hearts of all foodies on the Norland continent. After all, everyone who had been to Rodu knew that after tasting all of the food streets in Rodu, the world would always feel a little lacking in color. That was what Duke Abraham had once thought as well. As such, he had never left Rodu as that color was more important to him than anything else. However, he had now left Rodu for another color that was even more vibrant than Rodu. Are you sure that's Chaos City? On the back of the fat black falcon, Abraham pointed at the city in the distance with an excited expression. Yes, Duke. We're about to reach Chaos City. The beast tamer nodded with excitement on his face. However, he looked down at the black falcon beneath his feet, and his expression fell as he feebly said, but the black falcon doesn't seem to be able to make it. We might have to land and rest for an hour. Ha ha ha, the black falcon flapped its wings with great difficulty, panting heavily as if it were going to fall at any moment. Abraham's expression immediately darkened as he flared up with rage. What? You have to rest again. This is the 10th time, right? You told me yesterday that we'd reach Chaos City in the afternoon at the latest, but it's already been a day and a night, and you've only just caught sight of Chaos City? Are you messing with me? The beast tamer's face paled as he hurriedly said, I wouldn't dare to mess with you, Duke. It's just... I didn't think that the Black Falcon's stamina would have deteriorated to such an extent. Furthermore, it's overweight, so... Abraham waved a hand in a resolute manner and said, I don't care. I have to get to Chaos City right away, and throw everything I don't need down there. But... we already threw all of our luggage and guards down there yesterday. You and I are the only ones left on the Falcon's back, the beast tamer said in a trembling voice. Abraham turned around to find that there was no one on the Falcon's back. He then turned his gaze toward the beast tamer. The beast tamer's eyes gradually widened as if he had thought, "Aw." Right at this moment, the wings of the fat black eagle suddenly stopped moving, and then it fell down like a round ball. Two cries of shock. Boss, the line outside is already winding around the Aiden Square. There are so many customers. At noon, Yebamiya exclaimed in shock as soon as she walked in. It's a little too much. Mag also nodded with a hint of surprise. He had already seen customers lining up at the entrance of the restaurant when he had just returned, and it wasn't even 10 a.m. at that time. Even though, that number, there were still more to, at least as, there was twice as many to be expected to, so to be some attention Amy hats to the T Amy. To the attention, to say there were at least twice the number to date. Sally was a little concerned as she asked, won't there be a lot of customers waiting in line for a long time without being able to get their food? Yabamiya nodded in agreement. They'll definitely be very sad if they don't get to eat the food they want to eat. Meg's brows furrowed in contemplation before he made his way over to the counter and said, Mia, I'll write up a notice, and you can count the number of customers. After the 300th one, tell the customers behind them that they won't be able to get into the restaurant until lunchtime. Tell them to come back during the next lunchtime. All right. Mia nodded in response. Meg quickly finished writing a simple notice. Lunchtime wasn't very long, and serving 300 customers was most likely the restaurant's limit. Meg handed the notice to Yabamiya and said, after you tell the customers behind them, you can give this notice to the 300th one, and ask him to explain the situation to the customers behind them. You don't have to stand there the entire time. All right, I'll get to it right away. Yabamiya nodded before quickly making his way out of the restaurant. Being too popular is also a sin. Meg heaved a resigned sigh at the sight of the two long lines. If the owners of other restaurants were to hear that, they would definitely want to beat someone up. Sally looked at Meg, who was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, and a faint smile appeared on her face. She had just heard about the new notice from the city lord's castle, and that Meg had done something that they had all envisioned, but were unable to do. He really is a kind person, Sally thought to herself. Sally's gaze fell on Meg's long and slender fingers, and a thought suddenly occurred to her. A faint blush appeared on her face, and she retreated a little awkwardly. The host can solve this problem by extending the opening hours. If the opening hours in the morning are extended by 2 hours, the host can serve 300 more customers. If the opening hours in the afternoon are extended by 2 hours, the host can serve 600 more customers. If the opening hours in the evening are extended by 3 hours, the host can serve 1,000 more customers. Doubling the turnover is no longer a dream. The system's bewitching voice sounded in Meg's mind. System, do you think I'm an idiot? If I work 24 hours a day, when will I be able to enjoy life? Meg curled his lips in disdain, and then asked, System, is the staff dormitory ready? The staff dormitory has been completed, and the air is being purified. It is estimated that it will reach the highest standard in an hour. Very good. Meg nodded in satisfaction. Meg had specifically chosen different decorations for the three of them based on their personalities. During lunch, Meg put down his chopsticks and looked at everyone with a smile. I've already prepared the new staff dormitory for all of you. You can move in today. I'll take you there after lunch. It's right above Mia's ice cream shop. Above the ice cream shop? Yabamiya's mouth was slightly agape in disbelief. She had been in the ice cream shop for the past few days, and hadn't heard any sounds of construction upstairs. Staff dormitory. Sally was a little confused. Chapter 8:30. Sally looked at Meg with a hesitant expression and said, I'm living in a good place right now, and I have a part-time job at the Gaia Hotel. Don't be in such a hurry to turn me down. There's something else I have to announce. After 3 months of probation, Aisha, Mia, you two have done an outstanding job at the restaurant and provided excellent service to our customers, so I've decided to raise your salaries to 10,000 copper coins per month, and that's only for the restaurant. Mia is still the manager of the ice cream shop, so she'll receive an additional 10,000 copper coins per month. Also, I've noticed that Aisha has been helping out at the ice cream shop recently. If you'd like, you can quit your job at the hotel and help Mia out at the ice cream shop during your free time, and you'll receive an additional 5,000 copper coins per month. Meg cut off Sally with a smile as he turned to the two of them. 20,000 copper coins per month. Yabamiya's mouth gaped open as she stared at Meg with astonishment etched on her face. 3 months ago, she had been chased out of the kitchen and almost starved to death on the streets. Now, Meg was offering her 20,000 copper coins per month. What did 20,000 copper coins mean? She had never had so much money in her entire life. She had only seen so much money in the cash register at Mamie's. But now, it was going to become her monthly salary. Yabamiya didn't even dare to think about it. 15,000 copper coins. Sally's eyes also lit up slightly. She had chosen to become a waitress at Mamie's not only because she was addicted to delicious food, but also because she wanted to earn money so that she could travel around the continent. During the past 3 months, she had saved up a few thousand copper coins, but there was still a long way to go before she could travel around the continent. However, her goal had already changed. She wasn't going to travel around the continent anymore. Instead, she was going to stay in Chaos City and use the money she earned to provide some help to her poorer brethren so that they could live a better life in Chaos City. Barbara hesitated for a moment before asking, "What about me?" After coming to this world, she gradually understood the so-called wonderful use of money. After losing the identity of a princess, whether it was food, clothing, housing, or transportation, there was nothing that didn't cost money. Fortunately, Meg didn't chase her out during this period, otherwise, she might have to live on the streets. Meg looked at Barbara and said with a smile, "Barbara hasn't worked for a full month yet, but she has also shown outstanding ability and skills. Therefore, after this month's probation period, her salary will be increased from 300 copper coins to 5,000 copper coins. After 3 months, it will be increased to 10,000 copper coins." Meg recognized Barbara's ability. Other than the fact that she had a bit of a princess syndrome when she first arrived, she was able to adapt to her role very quickly. She could effectively improve the efficiency of the restaurant. Barbara's eyes lit up with little stars of excitement. She was well aware of the gap between herself and Sally and Yabamiya, so it wasn't difficult for her to accept that she would only receive the same salary after 3 months. However, the smile on her face faded, and she replied with a calm expression, "Yes. Boss, I don't think I should be paid so much for what I do. Besides, I volunteered to work at the ice cream shop, so I shouldn't be paid extra." Yabamiya shook her head as she looked at Meg. In the past, she had worked 16 hours a day in the kitchen of the restaurant, and all of it was the most arduous work. Now, working at Mamie's and the ice cream shop was a pleasure to her, and she didn't feel any hardship at all. Sally was also looking at Meg with a hesitant expression. The salary of the waiters in the Aden Square was naturally far lower than what Meg was paying them. Meg shook his head with a smile, and looked at everyone with a warm expression as he said, "The value that you've created far exceeds this salary. Also, every job and effort should have its own value. If it weren't for your passion for the ice cream shop, I wouldn't have entrusted it to you. If you don't accept this salary, I'll feel guilty." "That's right. The customers all say that you're the most beautiful scenery in the restaurant." Amy put a spoonful of fried rice into her mouth, and chewed before swallowing. "You make me even cuter." Amy's words made everyone burst into laughter. "Thank you, boss." Yabamiya stood up and bowed deeply to Meg. She raised her head to look into Meg's warm and smiling eyes, and a smile also appeared on her face. The luckiest thing that had happened to her in her life was probably meeting Meg, who had brought her to heaven when she was on the brink of death. "Thank you." Sally also looked at Meg with gratitude in her eyes. "I'm willing to accept a part-time job at the ice cream shop." Although the owner of Gaia Hotel was very nice, she still decided to quit that part-time job and devote herself to working at the restaurant and ice cream shop. She needed to earn more money. "Then I'll take you there in the afternoon. You can also take advantage of the free time in the afternoon to move the things you need to your new place. It's very well stocked, and you can move in with your bags." Meg nodded. "But isn't big sister Aisha living in the restaurant?" Amy suddenly asked curiously. In the morning, Sally's face immediately flushed, and she slowly lowered her head to pick up her spoon and continue eating. Meg raised an eyebrow, and hurriedly put a piece of chicken into Amy's bowl as he said, "Amy, try this chicken." Due to the limited reception capacity of the restaurant, many customers, including many regulars, who came because of the restaurant's reputation, had to leave in disappointment. Even Mabai, who was next door, could only sigh when she saw the long line. "Mr. Mac's business is getting better and better. We have to tell him in advance when we want to eat in the future." Cece stood at the entrance of the magic potion shop and sighed. Then she waved at Lulu, whose face was covered in soot, and said with a smile, "Lulu, let's go home and eat. But it's not as good as Mr. Mac's cooking." "Okay." Lulu smiled honestly, took off her apron, and hung it on the door. She walked to Cece and said gently, "I'm willing to eat your cooking for the rest of my life. I'm full." Mabai sighed faintly and turned to walk into the blacksmith shop. After lunch, Meg took Sally and the others to the staff dormitory. Considering that the empty space on the first floor and the remaining half of the space on the second floor might be used in the future, the dormitory staircase was designed outside the back door of the ice cream shop. The spiral staircase with exquisite carvings looked very elegant, and it led directly to the door on the second floor. After opening the door, they saw a spacious living room with high-quality wood floors, an open kitchen, a dining room with exquisite four-seater tables, a washroom, a bathroom, and a small balcony. The decoration style was elegant and classy with solid wood as the main theme. "Wow!" The three girls who followed them in looked around and were amazed. No matter how they looked at it, this house was like an exquisite piece of art. Chapter 831. You really can't read a woman's mind. Mag went downstairs and looked back at the closed door. He couldn't help but shake his head. He had prepared a pink princess room for Barbara, a snow and ice-themed room for Sally, and a starry sky-themed room for Mia. In the end, Barbara chose the snow and ice-themed room, Mia chose the pink princess room, and Sally chose the starry sky room. Furthermore, all three of them seemed to be very fond of the room. Meg's mind was filled with questions. This is great. I finally have a room that isn't pink. Barbara walked around the room with excitement on her face. She nodded with satisfaction as she murmured to herself, only snow and ice can match my temperament. Pink doesn't suit me anymore. I can still see the starry sky while lying on the bed. It's really amazing. Sally lay on the bed and looked at the stars on the ceiling. They were clearly far away, and her mind seemed to have been opened up. The bed was so soft, and the quilt was made of some unknown material. It was warm and comfortable, just like the bed last night. Sally blushed at the thought of last night. Wow, pink bed, pink quilt, pink walls. It's so beautiful and adorable. Yabamiya carefully sat down on the edge of the bed. She still felt as if she were in a dream as she looked around the room. She didn't think that she would also have such a pink room. In the garden of the Moreton Manor. Master, the competition between young Mistress Gloria and young Master Cyril will end in 3 days, the butler said respectfully behind Geoffrey, who was trimming a small pine tree. Geoffrey was still trimming the pine tree, and calmly said, "Then let's wait for the result in 3 days. The marinade is ready, but we can only use it in 3 days. This is the first stinky tofu on the Norland continent. I'm really looking forward to it." Meg looked at the large clay pot in the corner of the kitchen, and a peculiar smile appeared on his face. He was already looking forward to seeing the love-hate relationship between his customers. The sun gradually set in the west, and the earth was dyed red by its light. On a tall mountain outside Chaos City, 2 figures climbed to the top of the mountain with great difficulty. Have we arrived? Abraham looked up at the beast tamer in a feeble manner. His luxurious robe had been torn by the branches, and he was in quite a sorry state. The beast tamer, who had already reached the top of the mountain, grabbed the tallest rock on the top of the mountain and looked up with an expectant gaze. There were more mountains behind the mountain, endless mountains. The beast tamer faltered upon hearing this. A thought suddenly occurred to him, and a fearful expression gradually appeared on his face. He turned around with a trembling body and looked in another direction. There was a large city in that direction, and there was a large mountain in the middle of it. Duke, we seem to have crawled in the wrong direction. The beast tamer's voice was trembling. Abraham was taken aback, and he asked in bewilderment, "Wrong direction? What does that mean?" The beast tamer gulped before replying with difficulty, "We have to go down the mountain the same way we came from, then cross over the mountain on the other side." "Fuck you." Before the beast tamer had a chance to finish his sentence, Abraham had already kicked him down the mountain. He then looked in the direction of Chaos City with an expression of grief and indignation. What the hell was going on? The lights of the Blue Suede had been on for the entire night. The shop had been a little cramped due to the busy tailors, but it had already been renovated. There were some elegant decorations placed in the spacious shop. 3 sets of ceremonial robes of different colors hung in the middle of the shop, while the other 2 sets of dresses of different colors had 3 dresses of different sizes. The shop looked a little empty, but it made the 3 dresses in the shop appear even more intricate and beautiful, as if they were the most dazzling stars in the sky. "Young mistress, everything is ready. Please take a rest," Mars said with a sympathetic expression as he looked at Gloria, who was carefully inspecting the shop. Gloria picked up a shredded piece of paper in the corner, and shook her head with a smile as she looked at Mars. "It's all right, I'm not sleepy at all. However, Mars, I need you to make a trip to the workshop and see if the tailors need anything, and make sure that they're satisfied with the working environment." Mars looked at Gloria's slightly flushed face, and a smile appeared on his face as he nodded, and said, "All right, I'll set off right away." Due to Gloria's stunning performance at the Aden Chamber of Commerce's semi-annual banquet, the Suede clothing store had become a place that all of the women in Chaos City yearned for. The only 30 sets of ceremonial robes available were all reserved in less than half a day, and they made it very clear that they wouldn't be releasing any more, much to the disappointment of many women. Thankfully, Blue Suede was going to release 2 other sets of dresses today, and they announced that they would provide a sufficient supply, so many women were naturally attracted to the store. The sky had just brightened, and a series of luxurious horse-drawn carriages had already stopped outside the store. One after another, lavishly dressed noblewomen and young ladies disembarked from the carriages, and then formed a long line outside Blue Suede. "Ha! Didn't you say yesterday that you were going to take a beauty nap today? Didn't you say that you didn't like these dresses and didn't want to come at all?" Some of the noblewomen were chatting and laughing elegantly, while others were tearing apart the plastic sisterhood. On this day, the line of customers waiting outside Blue Suede and Amy's became a sight to behold in the Aden Square. Night fell, and the shop assistants closed the doors of the Suede. Even though their throats were a little hoarse from all the talking, and their legs felt like they were filled with lead from standing for an entire day, their faces were filled with excitement. Many of the shop assistants had been working at the Suede for many years, and they had always lived a leisurely life without customers. At the same time, they had always been worried that the Suede would close down, and they had never thought that one day the Suede would be so crowded with customers that they would have to limit the flow of customers. When Gloria had first arrived, the employees had still been skeptical about whether she had the ability to turn Blue Suede's losses into profits. However, the scenes that had unfolded today had completely dispelled all of their doubts. This young boss was definitely going to help Blue Suede reach new heights. In the office, Mars looked at Gloria with a smile, and said, "Young mistress, we sold a total of 220 dresses today, which is almost half of our stock. The price of each dress is 2,000 copper coins, so we made a total of 440,000 copper coins. With the 30 sets of ceremonial robes, we should have a turnover of around 4 million copper coins by the end of the competition. After deducting the costs, the net profit should be around 2,800,000 copper coins." Gloria's face was also filled with excitement. She thought for a moment and said, "The dresses will be distributed to the customers on the third day, so we won't charge it to the account for now." Chapter 832. The announcement made by Chaos City quickly spread across the entire continent, and attracted the attention of all races. The residents of Chaos City were quite open-minded about this. They were from different races, and they had all come together to create this Chaos City, so they weren't opposed to more elves joining Chaos City. However, this was a special period where the peace treaty was being signed, so this announcement naturally created quite a stir when it reached the leaders of all races. In the Grand Palace in Rodu, Andre looked at the memorial that had just been delivered to him, and his brows furrowed slightly. What is Michael trying to do? Is he preparing to accumulate power? Ha! Interesting. Your Majesty, do we need to do anything? An official beside him asked in a respectful manner. Let's wait and see. The elves should be the ones panicking right now. Andre casually set aside the memorial in his hand, and picked up another one. On the Demon Islands, there was an island enshrouded in gray mist. There were a few dim oil lamps lit in a huge cave, and a few sinister demons were gathered together. There were bones scattered all over the ground, and a few elven slaves huddled in a corner with horrified expressions. How dare Chaos City say something like this? They're trying to cut off our business. Yeah, we've given them too much face over the years, and they don't even know who they are anymore. They're just a bunch of rabble. How dare they say something like this? We've received a lot of spirit stones and resources from those idiots from the elven race over the years, and we're even able to capture elves in broad daylight. That's not a small business deal. If Chaos City were to cut us off just like that, our Iron Bull tribe wouldn't be able to accept it. The cave was in complete chaos, and all of the demons were looking at one another in an extremely agitated manner. That's enough. The tiger-like demon sitting at the head of the table let loose an enraged roar, and everyone gradually quieted down as they turned to look at him. It's already very difficult to find elves in the outside world. Half of them are in Chaos City, and we've already set our sights on them. Seeing as Chaos City has made such a public announcement against us, there's no need for us to hold back. We'll guard Chaos City and capture all of the elves who come here to seek refuge. We'll also capture some more elves from Chaos City." That demon sneered, and said, "The peace treaty will most likely not be signed in 3 months. The Norland continent is going to fall into chaos again. When that time comes, I want to see how Chaos City, which has no racial roots, can continue to exist." Haha. "Then let's set Chaos City as our target. I heard that there are all kinds of women there." All the evil demons burst into laughter. The eyes of the elves in the corner were filled with fear and resentment. The Wind Forest. The elves gathered in the main hall of the Set family once again. An elf turned to Borg with an anxious expression, and said, "Master Borg, Chaos City has made a public announcement about those traitors. If they all accept Chaos City's protection, then it'll be very difficult for us to obtain more traitors from the demons." All of the other elves also wore anxious expressions on their faces. The news that they had received today was undoubtedly a heavy blow to them. The issue of Irina hadn't even been resolved yet, and now, Chaos City was interfering. The structure of Chaos City was a little complex, but after 100 years of development, it had already become a major city that was not inferior to Rodu. It was already a major force on the Norland continent that couldn't be underestimated. Furthermore, due to the high turnover rate, no one knew just how many 10th-tier powerful beings there were in Chaos City. After all, there were even many powerful beings from the dragon race who liked to live in Chaos City for a period of time, and all of them claimed to be residents of Chaos City. Why are you panicking? Chaos City is nothing. Do you think the elves will be able to protect the traitors they want? Borg wasn't nervous in the slightest. Instead, a hint of mockery appeared on his face as he said, "The 100-year peace agreement is going to expire in 3 months. According to the current situation on the continent, it's most likely going to be very difficult for the 8 major races to reach an agreement to renew the peace agreement. Even if a war between species like the one that swept across the entire continent doesn't occur again, a few large-scale border wars are inevitable, and the continent is going to be redivided." A cold smile appeared on Borg's face as he said, "When that time comes, Chaos City, the symbol of peace, will be a little redundant. It can barely even protect itself, let alone protect others." What a joke. All of the elves were elated to hear this, but their expressions were quickly replaced by a hint of panic. "Master, are we not going to sign the peace agreement as well?" an elf asked hesitantly. A meaningful smile appeared on Borg's face as he replied, "That's not something that I can decide, nor is it something that our entire race can decide. Besides, our neighbors, the goblins, have been very restless in recent years. I've heard that they've mined a lot of ore and stored it underground during the past 100 years. All of the elves' eyes also lit up with greed upon hearing this. A jar of brine was quietly fermenting its unique flavor in a corner, waiting to release its unique aroma. After sending Barbara away, Meg was finally able to live his life with Amy again. Just as Meg had said, living in a house with no outsiders was a lot more comfortable. At the very least, he didn't have to worry about the princess who was also in the toilet when he had to urinate in the middle of the night. "Father, do you miss big sister Irina?" Amy jumped onto the bed in her purplish-pink pajamas after her bath, and curiously asked Mag, who was tidying up the wardrobe. Meg paused momentarily before turning to Amy with a smile as he asked, "Amy, do you miss her?" Yes, I do." Amy nodded with a reminiscent expression as she said, "I want to lie in her arms and sleep. It's so soft and warm and comfortable." Meg's heart sank slightly upon hearing this, but he still smiled as he said, "You'll be able to see her again soon." "Where is big sister Irina now? Can't we go and see her? Why do we have to wait for a while?" Amy turned to Meg with a perplexed expression. A hint of guilt welled up in Meg's heart as he sat down beside the bed and gently patted Amy's head as he said in a gentle voice, "Because she lives very far away, and she's very busy right now." We're also very busy, so we can only go and see her when everyone has time. Amy nodded thoughtfully before turning to Meg with a serious expression as she said, then, even if Father and big sister Irina get together, you can't forget about Mother. We still have to go to the moon and bring Mother back. After that, the four of us plus big sister Aisha, big sister Mia, big sister Barbara, teacher Luna, and big sister Gloria will be able to live a happy life together. Whoa. Chapter 833. Have you heard? The result of the competition between Miss Gloria and Cyril from Family Moreton is going to be out today. It said that the winner of this competition will be a seat on the board of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, as well as the right to control an industry. Doesn't that mean whoever wins this match will win the successor tournament? That's not entirely true. President Jeffrey has always been a patriarchal man. However, if Miss Gloria can win this competition, then she'll officially be on the same starting line as Cyril. She'll truly be qualified to compete with him for the right to inherit Family Moreton. Then who do you think will win this competition? I don't dare to say who will win, but I've seen Cree's blacksmith shop in full swing recently. Carts of ironware are being transported out of the shop. In contrast, Suede has been closed for the past 2 days. Even though it's very busy, 2 or 3 days is nothing compared to a month for Cree's blacksmith shop. On the second floor of a tea house in the Aden Square, merchants were chatting casually as they drank their morning tea. Family Moreton was one of the most prestigious families in Chaos City, and its successor had always been the focus of attention. Everyone had thought that Cyril, who had been criticized for his abilities, would undoubtedly inherit Family Moreton. Who would have thought that Gloria would suddenly appear out of nowhere, and make the competition between the two families even more exciting? Of course, if Gloria lost today, this big show would become a farce, and the curtains would have to come to an end. It was already shocking enough that the Buffett family had produced such a talented young woman. If Family Moreton was also inherited by a woman of the third generation, then many jaws would drop to the ground. Cyril stepped out of his horse-drawn carriage at the entrance of Cree's blacksmith shop, and quickly strode into the shop. He looked at Cree with a fawning smile, and asked, "How's the situation now?" Creed hurriedly said, "Young master, as of last night, Suede's revenue for the month totaled around 1 million copper coins. Even though most of the fabric wasn't included in the production costs, they've hired a lot of tailors from Chaos City, and they've also purchased some tools, so they've spent at least 600,000 copper coins, so the net profit is around 300,000 copper coins." So many. Cyril was shocked. Suede didn't have any revenue for more than 20 days. In just 2 days, it had sold 1 million yuan. But Carey had a confident look on his face as he said, "Young master, there's no need to worry. We also have a turnover of 1 million copper coins this month and a net profit of 500,000 copper coins. Moreover, I've pulled in a few big orders in the past 2 days, adding up to a total of 1 million and a deposit of 500,000 copper coins. On top of that, the competition ended at 10:00 this morning. Most importantly, Suede posted a notice on the entrance last night, stating that all of their stock has been sold out." Cyril was ecstatic to hear this, and he patted Creed on the shoulder with a smile as he said, "I knew I was right about you, Creed." The competition concluded at 10:00, and Jeffrey would send 2 teams to the 2 shops to verify the revenue and profits. Regardless of whether it was revenue or net profit, Cree's blacksmith shop clearly held an absolute advantage. No matter how quickly Suede sold out, there was nothing they could do if they didn't have enough stock. He was definitely going to win this competition. "I underestimated you, Gloria. It's a pity that you're still going to lose to me." Cyril wore a smug smile on his face. He was already thinking about how he was going to humiliate Gloria. Creed's face was also full of flattery as he leaned forward and whispered, "Young master, you're definitely going to win this competition, but the girl you mentioned before. Cyril's brows furrowed for a moment, but they quickly disappeared. He smiled and said, "Of course I remember. I'll send her to your house tonight." "Thank you, young master." Creed was ecstatic, and his mind was already filled with fantasies of that young and beautiful body. A trace of disgust flashed through Cyril's eyes. He waved his hand and said, "Tell them to tidy up the shop and prepare for the arrival of the audit team. Also, tell them that they'll have a 3-day holiday starting tomorrow, and everyone will get a big red packet." "Okay." Creed's eyes lit up as he ordered the workers to get to work. He then told them that Cyril was going to give everyone a big red packet. A commotion immediately broke out in the blacksmith shop as everyone thanked Cyril. "You'll only get a few hundred copper coins, but I'll get the entire family Moraton." Cyril looked at the cheering blacksmiths and thought to himself with some pride. A horse-drawn carriage stopped in front of the Suede early in the morning. Gloria, who was wearing a light gray dress, stepped out of the carriage and stopped in front of the shop. A smile appeared on her face as she looked at the stop sale notice hanging on the door. She then walked through the door that was open from the inside. As soon as Gloria walked through the door, Mars quickly walked up to her and whispered, "Young mistress, the 30 dresses have all been prepared. We've also informed all the customers yesterday that we'll be able to collect all the money this morning." There were over 30 young people in blue and white uniforms in the shop, and each of them had an exquisite wooden box with carved flowers placed beside them. Gloria looked at those intricately carved wooden boxes, which were still exuding a faint fragrance, and those spirited young people, and nodded with a pleased expression as she said, "Very good. Let's set off now, then. All of the goods have to be transferred to the Blue Suede account before 10 a.m. "All right." Mars nodded. He turned to the young people and said, "Remember, you have to smile at each and every customer. Make sure that the dresses are delivered to the customers in perfect condition. If anything goes wrong, you'll have to bear the liability of 100,000 copper coins. That's the only way you'll be worthy of your salary." "Yes." All of the young people's expressions changed as they replied in unison. They picked up the wooden boxes with both hands and walked out of the shop. They mounted their white unicorns and disappeared into the streets of the Aden Square. Gloria looked at Mars, who had dark circles under his eyes, and smiled as she said, "Uncle Mars, thank you for your hard work. Let's have breakfast together." Mars looked at the smile on Gloria's face, and he was slightly dazed. He felt as if he were seeing the little girl who loved to sit on the swing in the garden and read books. Back then, she loved to smile. He came back to his senses and smiled as well. "Of course I can't refuse an invitation from young mistress." The horse-drawn carriage left the Suede and headed toward Amy's. At 10 o'clock, 2 teams of 8 people entered the Blue Suede and Cree blacksmith shops at the same time. All of the workers were asked to leave the shops, including Gloria and Cyril. Moraton Manor. Jeffrey stood by the window with a cup of tea in his hand. He seemed to be waiting for something. Today, I'd like to recommend a novel called I Really Am Immortal by my good friend Xia Hua. The title of the book is very flirtatious, and the story is also very flirtatious. I've been reading it recently, and it's very flirtatious and flirtatious. Anyway, it's worth reading. Introduction. This book tells the story of how an immortal should live a positive and correct life under the guidance of socialist core values in modern society. Chapter 834. Cyril stood at the entrance of the blacksmith shop with a smug look on his face. He looked at the team of examiners who were carefully examining the accounts and comparing them to the balance of the debt, and he felt as if victory was already in his grasp. Regardless of how powerful he was, Jeffrey had no choice but to let him inherit family Moraton. From the very beginning, he was destined to be the winner of this competition. He knew Jeffrey, as well as his rigid and arrogant father. There was no way that he would hand over the empire that he had built to a woman. Just like how he had mocked old Buffett countless times in the past, he would never allow himself to become that kind of person. With that in mind, the smile on Cyril's face became even more pronounced. It was as if he could already see himself ruling over Chaos City in the future. Creed stood off to the side with a bashful smile on his face, and his eyes were also glowing. He had worked at this blacksmith shop for half of his life, and had never been given any opportunities for promotion. He couldn't be bothered to take care of the shop, and that was why the shop was slowly losing money. However, things were different now. He was riding on Cyril's coattails. When he became the leader of Family Moreton, or even the leader of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, he would definitely rise to the top as well. He would no longer have to work at this blacksmith shop, and would become a true member of the upper class of Chaos City. All of the employees of the blacksmith shop were also quite excited. They didn't know what a competition was, but they knew that business had been unexpectedly good this month, so they were definitely going to get a lot of pay. Furthermore, they would be able to have a 3-day holiday from tomorrow onward, and they would also receive a large red packet. That was enough to make them happy for an entire day. Half an hour later, the team of examiners sealed the accounts and locked them into a metal box before making their way out of the blacksmith shop. The leader of the team, a middle-aged man in a long black robe, turned to Cyril and said, "Young Master Cyril, the accounts have been examined. Please come with us to the manor now, and Master Moreton will announce the results of this competition. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go," Cyril said with a smile as he strode over to a lavish horse-drawn carriage. He stepped on the kneeling Creed's back, and climbed onto the carriage. The inspectors boarded 2 carriages and drove toward the Moreton Manor. Almost at the same time, the inspectors of the suede textiles shop also came out of the shop. Although they maintained a calm expression, their eyes were filled with shock. The middle-aged leader stepped forward and said respectfully, "Miss Gloria, please come with us to the manor. The president will announce the results of the competition there." The way the inspectors looked at Gloria had also changed. There was a hint of respect in their eyes. Gloria nodded with a smile, and said, "All right, after you." After the inspectors boarded the horse-drawn carriage, Gloria turned to Mars, who was standing at the side, and said, "Mars, come with me to the manor." Mars shook his head and said, "I don't think it's time yet." "Miss, you can go." Gloria looked at Mars, thought for a moment, and nodded with a smile. "I think it will be soon." Mars also smiled. The 3 carriages left Suede and headed for Moreton Hall. The hall of Moreton Hall was particularly lively. Madame Denise was sitting at the front with her eyes closed. Her thin and shriveled face gave her a monkey-like appearance, and it was quite clear that she wasn't an easygoing old lady. Jeffrey's 3rd daughter, Aurora, was curled up in a chair with her legs crossed. Her loose clothes were unable to hide her skeletal figure, and her sunken eye sockets were quite frightening. Much of her white hair had already fallen off, and she looked like an elderly woman with a mocking smile on her face. Cyril's twin daughters were wearing lavish dresses, and they were gloating as they looked at Lance's family sitting across from them. What's there to compete with? How could father lose to a little girl who's never even touched money before? Hernie was a little disdainful. Exactly, I think grandfather shouldn't have held this competition in the first place. It's going to be a joke anyway, Hertie chimed in. Shoo, don't talk nonsense. Aviva, who was sitting beside them, said. However, she didn't have any intention of scolding them. Instead, she had a smug smile on her face. Lance's family was sitting across from them, and Lance was reading a book calmly, as if he hadn't heard what everyone was saying. In contrast, Mickey was glaring at Hertie and Hernie with an indignant expression. He wanted to say something on several occasions, but Mrs. Deborah kept a hand on his wrist and used her eyes to warn him not to do anything rash. There wasn't any resentment on Mrs. Deborah's face. Instead, a gratified smile appeared on her face as she thought to herself, even if she loses, it's still a very good experience for Gloria. She's already grown up, and she doesn't have to feel inferior and isolate herself anymore. Master has arrived. The butler's voice sounded from outside. Herty and Herney's smiles immediately faded, and they sat down obediently in their chairs. Even though their appearances were quite mundane, they did appear to be quite ladylike. Aurora, who had been slumped in her chair, also immediately sat up straight, and a hint of vigor appeared in her lifeless eyes. She looked as if she had suddenly become a few years younger, but there was a hint of fear in her eyes. Lance put down his book and sat up straight. Mickey also straightened his chest and sat upright on the chair, not daring to move. Old Mistress Denise opened her eyes. The atmosphere in the hall immediately became tense and oppressive. Geoffrey slowly strode into the hall. He took a glance at Lance first, and then his gaze paused on Mickey for a moment. He then looked past Herty and Herney, and when his gaze fell on Aurora, he made no attempt to hide the disgust in his eyes, and sat down at the head of the table. Herty and Herney glared at Mickey, but they didn't dare to say anything. The hall was completely silent. No one dared to make a sound, and the atmosphere was quite oppressive. The 6 horse-drawn carriages stopped outside the Moreton Manor. Cyril jumped down from the horse-drawn carriage and looked at Gloria, who was gracefully making her way down the wooden stairs. He sneered in a disdainful manner, "Isn't this my outstanding niece? It's quite surprising that the president would make an exception and give you a chance to challenge me. Unfortunately, even though he gave you a chance, it didn't seem to affect the result at all." Gloria looked at Cyril with a smile, and said, "If it didn't affect anything, why would Uncle Cyril be standing here with me right now?" The smile on Cyril's face stiffened, and he waved his hand as he said, "You've got a glib tongue. Let's see if you can still talk like this later. Tell the president to give you another chance." He then turned around and quickly strode into the manor. Chapter 835. Young Master Cyril has arrived. The announcement shattered the oppressive silence in the hall. "My son is here." A doting smile appeared on old Mistress Denise's face as she craned her neck to look toward the door. Aviva, Herty, and Herney were also elated as they turned toward the door at the same time. The sneer on Aurora's face became even more pronounced as she slowly slumped back into her seat, as if she were a spectator waiting for a good show to begin. Cyril appeared at the door with a smug smile on his face, as if everything was under his control. Reassuring smiles appeared on Herty and Herney's faces, and the smile on Cyril's face indicated that everything was already set in stone. "Father." Cyril quickly strode into the room before turning to Geoffrey in a respectful manner. Geoffrey merely nodded with an expressionless face. Cyril turned to Lance with a hint of mockery in his voice as he said, "Big brother, you really should teach Gloria a lesson. She has completely lost all sense of seniority." Lance looked into Cyril's eyes, and said in a calm voice, "You should find someone to teach your daughters a lesson first. Don't let them learn from you." A hint of fear suddenly appeared in Cyril's eyes as he looked into Lance's eyes. Even now, he was still a little fearful of his big brother, who was always surrounded by all kinds of halos. Herty and Herney's expressions both changed upon hearing this. They had always looked down on Lance and his family, and they didn't think that Lance would accuse them of being shameless. If it weren't for the fact that George was present, they would most likely be cursing this bookworm uncle of theirs. Mickey's eyes lit up, and he seemed to be looking at Lance with a slightly different expression. A hint of concern appeared in Deborah's eyes, but she wasn't too surprised. If there was anyone in this world who could make her husband put down his book and risk his life for her, then it had to be Gloria. Denise glared at Lance and said, "Lance, how can you say that about Hertie and Herney? They're so cute and lovely. You should teach Gloria a lesson. She's just a woman who keeps showing up in public. She even wants to inherit family Moreton. I think she's crazy. Women, heh." Aurora pursed her lips, and the smile on her face became even more mocking. "Miss Gloria has arrived." At this moment, another voice sounded from outside. Gloria strode into the room gracefully and calmly. She stood beside Cyril, and extended a respectful bow toward Geoffrey as she said, "Greetings, grandfather." "Yes." Geoffrey nodded slightly, his face expressionless. Gloria turned to Denise and said calmly, "Grandmother, I'm not crazy. I'm just doing what a woman can do. If you think that a woman can't do something because of her gender, then you're most likely a woman, a narrow-minded woman." Denise's expression immediately stiffened, and she stared at Gloria with incredulity in her eyes. In this family, aside from Geoffrey, no one dared to speak to her like that, not even Lance. Hertie and Herney were also astonished. They looked at Gloria's stunning features and beautiful dress, and they couldn't hide the envy and jealousy in their eyes. This was a woman who had once worn a veil all day and allowed them to mock and ridicule her as they pleased. However, after removing her veil, she was so devastatingly beautiful. Furthermore, she couldn't be bothered to confront them. Instead, she stood directly in opposition to their father, and even Cyril was feeling a little exhausted dealing with her. Now, she even dared to speak directly to their grandmother. This was simply unbelievable. "She's dead for sure." Hertie and Herney came to their senses, and gloating expressions appeared on their faces. Lance was looking at Gloria with a hint of surprise in his eyes, but more than that, he was very pleased. A hint of reverence appeared in Mickey's eyes, and it was as if he were meeting his big sister for the first time. Aurora's eyes immediately lit up as she stared at Gloria, and it was as if she had seen something incredible. You. Denise pointed a finger at Gloria, and her face was flushed with rage, but she didn't know how to refute her. Cyril turned to Gloria, and said in a cold voice, "Gloria, all right, shut up, all of you." Geoffrey had remained silent this entire time, and he withdrew his gaze from Gloria with a hint of approval in his eyes. He then swept his gaze across everyone in the hall. Everyone immediately fell silent, and even Madame Denise immediately shut her mouth, not daring to utter a single sound. Cyril opened his mouth, but he swallowed his words when he saw Geoffrey's grim expression. A hint of a smile appeared on Gloria's face. She had kept those words in her heart for a long time, and even though it felt good to say them out loud, she was still a little nervous. She didn't expect Geoffrey to be on her side. The hall fell silent again, and Geoffrey said to the butler at the door, "Let the inspection team in." The two inspection team leaders walked in with wooden boxes in their hands, and stood beside Gloria and Cyril respectively. Let's see how long you can keep this up." Cyril glanced at Gloria with a mocking smile on his face. "Bitch, when father becomes the head of family Moreton, I'll drive all of you out and sell you to a brothel." Herney thought to herself as she glared at Gloria with a hint of hatred in her eyes. Heidi's eyes flashed with a murderous glint. When grandfather dies, I'll see who can protect a bitch like you. I'll cut your face 100 times and make you wear a veil for the rest of your life." A cold smile also appeared on Denise's face. She had already made up her mind that she was going to kick Gloria out of the family once the results were out. No one in this family could talk to her like that aside from her master, so she had to pay the price. Geoffrey looked at the two accountants and said, "Tell me the results." The accountant standing beside Cyril opened the box in his hand and took out an account book. Cyril's Cree's blacksmith shop suffered a loss of 30,000 copper coins last month. This month's turnover is 1. 55 million copper coins, of which 500,000 copper coins are the deposit for next month's order. After deducting 500,000 copper coins, the profit is 1.05 million copper coins. The deposit has been received. Denise's face lit up and she exclaimed, from a loss of 30,000 copper coins to a profit of 1.05 million copper coins. My son is really a business genius. That's great. Heidi and Hernie's faces lit up at the same time. They looked at Gloria with ridicule. This crazy woman had never even touched money before. How could she have made 1 million copper coins in just 1 month? It was already good enough that she didn't suffer a loss. Cyril's face was also full of pride. He was waiting for Jeffrey to announce the results. Suede Clothing, run by Miss Gloria, suffered a loss of 50,000 copper coins last month. This month's turnover is 4.02 million copper coins. After deducting 850,000 copper coins, the net profit is 3.17 million copper coins, not including the deposit. At this moment, the accountant standing beside Gloria took out the account book and said calmly. Chapter 836. In the quiet hall, everyone looked at the accountant with their mouths wide open. Their faces were full of shock. 4 million. After a long while, Cyril finally recovered from his shock, and his voice immediately became shrill, as if he were a monkey whose tail had been stepped on. He had seen the blacksmith shop's 1 million yuan turnover increase day by day. This was the first time he had experienced the hardships involved. However, the Suede's turnover was only 1 million yuan. How did it suddenly become 4 million yuan? Is there a mistake? How could she have so many? Old Mistress Denise also stood up from her chair with a look of shock on her face. How is this possible? Hertie and Hernie's expressions both changed. Even their father's blacksmith shop only had a monthly turnover of 1 million copper coins, but Gloria's clothing shop had a turnover of 4 million copper coins, which was 4 times more than Cyril's. Big sister, you're so awesome. Mickey jumped up from his chair and looked at Gloria with admiration. Lance was also staring at Gloria with astonishment in his eyes. Cyril was a good-for-nothing, but he had been in Chaos City's business circle for over 20 years, and his network was far superior to that of Gloria. Even a blacksmith shop that was making a loss was able to secure enough orders through his connections, and turn the situation around from a loss to a profit of 500,000. But how did Gloria do it? In just a month after taking over Suede, he had turned a textile shop that had been losing money for several years into a profitable business. His turnover had reached a terrifying 4 million renminbi, and his profits had also reached 3,170,000 renminbi. This was simply unbelievable. Jeffrey's expression didn't change much when he heard Cyril's figure of 1 million. This was the highest turnover that Cyril's blacksmith shop had ever achieved, and he wasn't surprised that Cyril could achieve this. It was just average. However, he was the one who had opened the Suede shop, and he was the one who had even named it. Family Moreton had started with this shop, and gradually grew into a colossus that encompassed all types of major industries. However, even at the height of Suede's glory, his monthly turnover had never exceeded 3 million copper coins, let alone 4 million copper coins and a profit of 3,170,000 copper coins. How did Gloria achieve such a high turnover and incredible net profit in just a month's time? She didn't have to rely on any connections. How did she do it? Jeffrey was looking at Gloria with a hint of surprise and curiosity in his eyes, as well as a hint of curiosity. Back then, she had made a name for herself in the Chaos City's business circle. Now that Gloria had taken over a textile shop that was on the verge of bankruptcy, her first month's sales had reached 4 million spirit stones, resulting in a profit of 3,170,000 spirit stones, which wasn't far behind Shears. How had she done it? Jeffrey's heart was filled with curiosity. He had never heard of any tailor shop in Chaos City that could make 4 million copper coins a month. Aurora's expression became even more derisive, and it was as if there were flames burning in her eyes. Cyril came to his senses, and glared at the bookkeeper as he yelled, "You must have made a mistake. This lass's shop only makes 1 million copper coins a month. How could she make 4 million copper coins? You're lying to her." Dennis's expression also darkened, and he said in a cold voice, "How dare you? Do you know what price you have to pay for lying in a setting like this? Some people are really unscrupulous in order to win. I wonder if she betrayed herself to make others help her even if they have to lose their jobs. However, her method is a little clumsy." The panic on Hertie and Herney's faces immediately turned into mockery. A stern expression appeared on the accountant's face as he said in a neither servile nor overbearing manner, "Please respect our audit team, old madam and young Master Cyril. This is a bill that is guaranteed by the reputations of all 8 of us auditors. It contains a detailed record of all of Blue Suede Fashion's income and expenditure, as well as the sum of money in the store's treasury. All of the transactions have been verified, and no additions or deletions have been made. If Mistress and young Master have any questions, please send another audit team to Suede. We'll take full responsibility for this bill." Cyril didn't back down. Instead, he flared up, "Then tell me, she closed her shop for over 20 days this month. How did she make 4 million copper coins? Furthermore, she only made 1 million copper coins last night, so where did the extra 3 million come from?" The bookkeeper flipped open the account book in his hand and read aloud, "According to the records, Suede Textiles Shop sold a total of 525 dresses in the past 2 days, and each dress sold for 2,000 copper coins, resulting in a turnover of 1,050,000 copper coins. However, this morning, the shop assistant delivered all of the 30 dresses that had been ordered by the customers and collected all of the money. Each dress sold for 100,000 copper coins, resulting in a total of 3 million copper coins. The total is 4,050,000 copper coins." Gasps could be heard in the hall. Only now did everyone realize how the 4 million copper coins were made up of. However, the 100,000 copper coins per dress still surprised them. Hertie and Herney recalled the dress that Gloria had worn during the banquet. If they were asked to spend 100,000 copper coins to buy the same dress, they probably wouldn't even bat an eyelid. Thus, a hint of panic appeared in their eyes. 100,000 copper coins per dress. It's just a normal dress with no gemstones or jade pendants. Do you think I'm an idiot? Cyril was already starting to panic, but he still managed to put on a brave front. Shut up. Jeffrey glanced coldly at Cyril and said in a low voice, "I was the one who sent the inspection team, and they've all been with me for decades. Even if I don't believe you, I'll believe them." Jeffrey raised his voice slightly and said, "These 2 bills are the result of today's competition. Gloria is the winner." A smile appeared on Gloria's face, and she nodded happily at Lance and the others. Lance also smiled at the sight of Gloria's smile. Mickey was so happy that he jumped up and down. Cyril's face was already a little pale. He took 2 steps forward and looked at Jeffrey with a trembling voice, and said, "Father, this is impossible. Gloria must have cheated. She must have falsified the accounts. It's impossible that she received 3 million copper coins in the morning. Do you think I'm an idiot?" Jeffrey looked into Cyril's eyes, and asked calmly. Cyril took 2 steps back, and he didn't dare to say anything. Jeffrey looked at Gloria and said, "From today onward, all textiles-related businesses in Family Moreton will be managed by Gloria. I'll recommend you to be a board member at the next Aden Chamber of Commerce executive meeting." Thank you, grandfather, Gloria said respectfully, and she couldn't hide the excitement in her eyes. Chapter 837. If you're willing to give her a chance now, why didn't you give me a chance back then? Just because I'm a daughter, you forced me to marry a man I didn't like at the age of 17? You can just throw me to anyone you want to curry favor with like an object? Then throw me into the ditch when I'm no longer of any use to you. You don't even want to look at me again. At this moment, Aurora, who had been silent all this time, suddenly stood up and shouted at Jeffrey, who had already walked to the door. Jeffrey stopped and looked back at Aurora. He frowned slightly and said coldly, "Do you still think you're a human?" "Aurora, don't say any more." Old Lady Denise whispered anxiously. "Yes. I'm not a human. I'm neither a human nor a ghost now. I don't deserve to call myself a member of Family Moreton." Aurora's smile was somewhat sarcastic. She thumped her chest hard and stared at Jeffrey without the slightest intention of avoiding his gaze. "But isn't all this thanks to you, my dear father? When you married me to that drunkard, did you ever think about the pain and torture your daughter had to go through every night? What kind of bad habits he forced her to learn? You knew it. You knew it long ago. He had all the bad habits you hate. It was you who turned your daughter into a person you hate. It was you who kicked me into the fire pit and made me look like this. And now you're standing at the edge of the fire pit and laughing at me. Doesn't your conscience hurt?" Aurora's bloodshot eyes stared at Jeffrey. Her ferocious look was somewhat terrifying. Jeffrey's frown deepened, but his expression was still calm. "Everything you've been tainted with is your own choice. It has nothing to do with me." "What does it have to do with you?" You haven't changed at all after so many years. Women are just objects to be used by you. There's no equality or exception to speak of." Aurora chuckled as she pointed a finger at Gloria with a mocking expression, and said, "She's just a whetstone that you're using to hone your disappointing son. No matter what kind of abilities and aptitudes she possesses, she was destined to never become the successor of the Moreton family from the moment she was born. That's because she's a woman." "A woman?" Aurora's face was full of madness. Her veins covered her prematurely aged face. Her hands were like chicken claws, only bones were left. Her eyes were bloodshot. The hall became a little quiet. Old Lady Denise wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't dare to step forward. Jeffrey looked into Aurora's eyes and said, "She's gone crazy. Take her away." The steward who was standing at the door hesitated for a moment before waving his hand towards the door. Two servants quickly walked in and carried Aurora out of the door. "You're the one who killed your daughter. You're the one who killed your daughter." Aurora screamed crazily. When she came to Gloria's side, she looked at her with a bitter smile. "Don't believe him. He's a liar. He'll never let a woman be in power. Otherwise, I'll end up like you." Aurora's voice disappeared outside the door. The hall became quiet again. Everyone's expression changed slightly. Cyril's eyes lit up again. Although it quickly went dormant, the dejection on his face was gone. Gloria's brows furrowed slightly. Her expression was still calm, as if she wasn't too affected. Jeffrey looked at the two of them with a serious expression. "Everything you've done this year will be recorded, just like today's account book. The best and the worst will be determined by what you've done and the final result on the account book. I'm going to announce the final result. During this process, there will be 4 review teams of 16 people. 2 will be in the light, and 2 will be in the dark. So don't try to play any tricks." Cyril's expression became serious. He suddenly felt a little uncertain. Gloria nodded thoughtfully. Jeffrey turned and walked out the door. The housekeeper and the two bookkeepers put away the account book and followed Jeffrey out the door with the wooden box in their arms. Soon, they disappeared through the door. "Sister, you're amazing." Mickey was the first to rush forward. He looked at Gloria with admiration. He felt as if his sister had become another person, a super powerful person. Lance and Deborah looked at Gloria with gratification. They couldn't hide the pride and smiles on their faces. "Humph, how dare a woman dream of inheriting the Moreton family? I won't let that happen. Only Cyril has the right to inherit this family." Matriarch Denise harumphed coldly before walking out of the door. Cyril looked at Gloria and said coldly, "You won't be so lucky 1 year from today. I'll let you know who's the real successor of family Moreton. When that time comes, you'll be kicked out of the house." Gloria said calmly, "From today onwards, Swade will be my personal property. If you lose 1 year from now, I hope you have something to take away." "Humph." Cyril snorted angrily. He turned and walked quickly out of the door. Heidi stepped forward. She looked at Gloria and said angrily, "You have a sharp tongue. I think you'll look better if you cover your face with gauze, ugly. If you don't squat in the well and look at people, maybe your vision will be closer to people." Gloria glanced at Heidi. "At least you won't wear a bunch of shiny things on your body." "You." Heidi and Hernie's faces changed color. They looked at the gemstones and sequins hanging on their bodies and their faces turned red. Gloria continued, "Also, watch your words. According to the family rules, you'll be punished for what you just said." Herdy and Hernie immediately swallowed their words. If Gloria had said this to them a month ago, they could continue to mock her as much as they liked. After all, she was just a pitiful woman who was despised by everyone, and didn't even dare to show her face in front of everyone. However, Gloria was different now. She had taken over all of family Moreton's fabric businesses and was about to become a board member of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. She was already in the same position as Cyril. "Humph." The two of them harumphed coldly and left in a huff. This rich aroma is just perfect. I can't stop myself." In the kitchen, Meg lifted the lid of a jar of brine and took a deep sniff. An intoxicated look appeared on his face. Ding! The host's insanely powerful level has increased dramatically. A hidden mission has been triggered. Please capture a red-top tricolor duck within 48 hours. Location, red-top tricolor duck breeding base, Warden Lake, the Wind Forest. Chapter 838. What did you just say? What's a breeding base? Where is it? Isn't Warden Lake the holy lake of the elven race? You're raising ducks there. The ceramic lid in Mag's hand almost fell to the ground as he glared at her. That's not an ordinary duck. The red-top tricolor duck is an extremely rare species of wild duck. Unlike other wild ducks, which have more bones and less meat, the red-top tricolor duck is more like a swan. It's plump and juicy. It's the best choice for roast duck. Furthermore, red-top tricolor ducks are first-tier magic beasts, so unlike normal wild ducks, they usually travel in pairs and don't like to live in groups. They fish in lakes and swamps during the day, and sleep in trees at night. They're extremely vigilant, and there are very few of them, so it's not easy to catch them. Warden Lake has excellent water quality and abundant fish, making it the ideal breeding ground for red-top tricolor ducks. The system has raised thousands of red-top tricolor ducks in Warden Lake on a semi-free range basis. You will now have to go to Warden Lake to catch a red-top tricolor duck and experience the process of obtaining food from the breeding ground. You will be able to inspect the natural breeding ground that the system has set up. The ducks raised in Warden Lake are on a completely different level from the domestic ducks. The system began to explain. Wait. What's important now isn't what kind of duck it is. Is it really appropriate for you to be raising ducks in a lake? Also, why do I have to go all the way to Warden Lake to catch a duck? I'm very busy. Meg interjected with furrowed brows. He had only just returned to Chaos City, so he was most likely going to incur the wrath of everyone if he were to take a leave of absence again. Of course, the most important thing was that he was very wary of the Wind Forest. Warden Lake was already in the heart of the forest, so it was very likely that he would encounter elves there. Elves were very territorial, and no one was allowed to enter the Wind Forest without permission. If they were discovered, they would be treated as trespassers. Meg was still far from being able to travel through the Wind Forest as he pleased. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to meet Irina in a year. The mission has been issued, and the 48-hour countdown will commence. If you're unable to complete the mission within the allotted time, 5 strength points and 1 million copper coins will be deducted. Oi, you're forcing me to do this. Meg raised an eyebrow. If you complete the mission, you will receive a Quanjude Peking duck recipe, a supply of roast duck ingredients, and all necessary cooking tools. Peking duck. Meg's eyes immediately lit up. This was one of his favorite delicacies. The plump roast duck had crispy skin and tender meat, and it was delicious and fragrant. Regardless of whether it was eaten directly with sweet sauce and green onions, or when it was wrapped in a lotus leaf biscuit, all of the fragrant and tender delicacies made him yearn for it. This recipe is called Quanjude roast duck. The old method of roasting duck was abandoned and the traditional method of roasting duck was improved. As for the specifics, you will naturally know after you complete the mission. The system replied. A hint of interest appeared in Meg's eyes, but he still asked in a cautious manner, System, the Wind Forest is very far away, and it's heavily guarded by the elven race. Am I going to die there? Won't I lose both my life and my treasure? Tomorrow is the elven ceremony for the goddess of life. Most of the elves will be attending the ceremony, so Warden Lake is most lightly guarded. As for how to get to the Wind Forest, I'm sure you'll have a way, the system replied in a nonchalant manner. Ceremony. Meg pondered this for a moment. The elven race worshipped the goddess of life, and they held a grand ceremony every year. Most of the elves would attend the ceremony, so it was indeed the most lightly guarded time. However, no one could guarantee that no mishap would occur, so Meg still wore a concerned expression. System, this is going to be a very perilous journey. Can you give me a life-saving talisman that will allow me to return to my peak condition? If I die, you'll lose everything. As long as you don't do anything stupid, there's only a 5% chance that you'll die, so there's no need for a life-saving talisman. On top of that, returning to your peak condition is the ultimate prize, and it's not something that can be obtained at any time. Please be aware that you're just an unlucky person, the system replied in a mocking voice. If you don't want to give me a life-saving talisman, then you can come crying to me when your father dies. Meg pursed his lips. It looked like his plan to trick the system into giving him a life-saving talisman had fallen through. Otherwise, he would have gone to the ceremony to show off his skills and alleviate some of the pressure on Irina in the Wind Forest. Alright, looks like I'll have to go to the Wind Forest to catch some ducks tomorrow, Tang Wulin said to himself. He still couldn't eat the roast goose that Amy had been longing for, but the roast duck roast by Quanjude's master chef was far more delicious than the roast goose. After learning how to roast a roast duck, Meg could find a goose and try it out. This stinky tofu. Meg looked at the brine in front of him. He had been facing the brine for hundreds of days in the test field for the god of cookery, and he had even tasted a large mouthful of it. Now, he could no longer smell the stench, and all he could smell was the rich aroma of the stinky tofu. I won't release it for the time being. I'll release it after I return from this trip. At that time, I can also test whether the molecular isolation system can really isolate the stench. This is the key to why the stinky tofu can be sold in restaurants. Meg nodded slightly. He put the lid back on, and the air treatment system automatically filled the kitchen with fresh air. I'll just steal a duck this time, so I'll have to keep a low profile. It'll be a little awkward if I run into Irina. It's only been a few days since the start of the year. It'll be awkward if I can't help but miss her. Meg murmured. He couldn't help but think of the young girl in the white dress. That mischievous look was better than any girl he had ever seen. It shouldn't be a problem to sneak a peek. The result of the competition between Gloria and Cyril quickly spread through the business circle of Chaos City. Family Moreton was one of the most prestigious families in Chaos City, and everyone was always curious about the successor. Back when Lance announced that he would give up on inheriting family Moreton's business and choose to become a teacher at Chaos School, Cyril became Jeffrey's only choice. Everyone thought that Cyril would eventually inherit family Moreton and become the new head of the family. Who would have thought that after Lance's daughter grew up, she would announce her participation in the competition? Chapter 839. Meg was most likely the first to hear about Gloria's victory. This was because Miss Gloria was sitting right across from him, and her scorching gaze was almost unbearable. "Thank you so much, Mr. Meg," Gloria said gratefully. Meg smiled and said, "You're too kind, Miss Gloria. You won this competition with your own abilities." He was worried that if he spoke a little later, she would say something like, "I can't repay you with anything, so I can only," or something along those lines. But why are you worried about that? Meg looked at Gloria's long eyelashes, and her lavender eyes. They were so beautiful that they were irresistible. She was probably worried that he wouldn't be able to resist saying yes. Gloria said, "I'll get the accountant to send the bill and 20% of the profits to the restaurant tomorrow. At the same time, I'll give the first 10% of the profits to the foundation to buy autumn clothes for the children. The weather is already getting cold." A hint of warmth welled up in Meg's heart at the sight of Gloria's concerned expression. He nodded and said, "It's time to buy some clothes for the children, but you can give them to me the day after tomorrow. I have to go out tomorrow." "Are you going out again, Mr. Meg?" Gloria was a little surprised to hear this. "I'm going out to gather materials. The restaurant hasn't released any new dishes in a while, so I'm going out to look for inspiration." Meg nodded with a smile. If it weren't for the system's sudden announcement of a new mission, he wouldn't be going out either. "You're a very hard-working person, Mr. Meg." Gloria looked at Meg with a hint of admiration in her eyes. He was already so powerful, but he was still so hard-working and demanding. The two of them didn't chat for very long. A faint smile appeared on Meg's face as he watched Gloria's horse-drawn carriage disappear into the distance. A young woman who had once covered her face with a veil had taken over family Moreton's textiles business in just a few short months, and was about to become a board member of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. All of this had been changed by a single dish of tofu pudding. This was such an interesting thing. This sense of accomplishment had surpassed the enjoyment of cooking itself. It was more like a kind of sublimation, allowing him to find the meaning of what he was doing. Even if it was a chef, if he did his best, he could still bring about some beautiful changes to this world. The sun was setting in the west. In the north of the city, two people and a fat eagle finally climbed up the tall mountain. They looked at the city walls that were clearly visible not far away, and their faces were filled with gratification. Abraham's lips were already cracked due to the lack of water, and he turned to the beast tamer as he asked, "Can we leave now?" The beast tamer appeared to be in an even worse state. There were several large bumps on his head, and he hurriedly said, "Yes. Your Excellency, we'll definitely be able to do it this time. After resting for 2 days, the Black Eagle has already recovered a lot of its strength. It won't be a problem for us to rely on it to fly the rest of the journey." The black eagle at the side also perked up and raised its head. The two climbed onto the eagle's back with some difficulty. "Let's go." The beast tamer pointed in the direction of Chaos City in high spirits. The fat eagle spread open its wings and flapped them with all its might, slowly ascending upward like a balloon. However, the speed at which it was flapping its wings was clearly slowing down. When it reached an altitude of around 5 meters, it suddenly stopped flapping its wings, and plummeted downward. "Arg! Didn't you say it would be fine?" Maybe it's hungry too." "Arg!" Two howls of anguish erupted from the round meatball that was rolling back down the mountain. After dinner hours, Meg announced to Sally, who was cleaning up the restaurant, that the restaurant would be closed for the day the next day. Immediately thereafter, manager Mia announced that the ice cream shop would be open for the entire day the next day. At the same time, she recruited Barbara as a temporary worker, and the latter gladly accepted the offer. The girls didn't have any objections to Meg's decision to go out to gather ingredients. After all, every time Meg went out to gather ingredients, he would come back with new dishes very quickly. They were all different in style, but they were all very delicious. "Father, can Amy come with you tomorrow?" Amy asked as she looked at Meg with anticipation in her eyes. Meg shook his head, and said, "Not this time. Amy just took 5 days off a few days ago. If she takes another leave so soon, she'll fall behind in her magic studies." "But..." Amy pouted, a little unhappy. "When we come back, Father will make you a delicious roast duck." Meg stroked Amy's head with a smile. "Roast duck." Amy's eyes immediately lit up. She looked at Ugly Duckling, which was lying lazily on the counter, and excitedly said, "So it can be roasted even before it grows into a swan." Ugly Duckling immediately stood up on its hind legs and fell off the counter with a thump. It hid behind the counter and looked at Amy with resentment, trembling uncontrollably. "Don't be afraid, Ugly Duckling. Come here and let me hug you." Amy walked over to Ugly Duckling with a smile. She reached out and picked up Ugly Duckling, who was still scrutinizing it, and pinched its belly. She nodded with satisfaction and said, "It's already very fat. This must be what they call autumn fat. It'll be very delicious when roasted." Ugly Duckling looked at Amy with horror in its eyes. It turned its head away, trying to escape. After coaxing Amy to sleep, Meg turned on the lamp on his desk and pulled out a few books on elven matters that he had just brought back from the bookstore a few days ago. He had been too busy during the past 2 days, so he hadn't been able to read much. He was going to go to the Wind Forest the next day to catch some ducks, so it was a good idea to do some last-minute research. 2 hours later, Meg turned off the lamp and went to bed. The Grand Elven Memorial Ceremony lasted for 3 days, and it was presided over by the Elven Queen. Aside from the slaves and the guards, all of the elven race had to attend. This was clearly good news for Meg. Warden Lake was the second largest inland freshwater lake on the Norland continent. It spanned from the northern part of the Wind Forest all the way to the north. It belonged to the elven race, and there would be elven guards patrolling the lake. Aside from many beautiful legends about elves bathing in the lake, there were also some legends and speculations about water monsters in the lake. However, most of these legends were based on the fantasies of other races, so they weren't very credible. Meg guessed that these so-called water monsters were most likely magic beasts. The fact that the system was able to raise ducks in the lake indicated that there were some magic beasts in the lake, but they were most likely all low-level magic beasts. Her Majesty's announcement, "I will be going into seclusion from this day forth. No one is allowed to disturb me unless the elven race is in a dire situation. Helena will be presiding over the ceremony tomorrow, and all elven matters will be decided by the panel of elders." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.